Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku never learned All Might's secret part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 3, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. All men aren't created equal. That was a lesson I had learned a long time ago. I took a shaky breath in and held my limp arm close to my chest, cradling it there. Kaken would think me weak, and my mother would just use this as an excuse to call me fragile again. Fragile, my mind spat bitterly. I hated that word. Sure, I might not be strong, and sure, I was quirkless, but did that mean I was a fragile little porcelain doll that would break at a moment's notice? No, that was how my mother saw me. Weak, small, fragile, helpless. I sniffled and pulled out my phone, opening Discord. It was awkward, considering I was still cradling my arm to my chest. But I needed a moderator to send me the location of the nearest free clinic. Even getting a phone had proven to be a nightmare, but I convinced Mom it was worth it. What if I get kidnapped? What if I get lost? I need to be able to get home. I blew out a breath and slowly typed with one hand, private messaging a mod. This Discord server was for the quirkless only. The quirked weren't allowed on. The only way to join was to get an invite from a mod or an existing member. And then you would have to provide your quirkless license and identification. Even then, we weren't allowed to share our location or identities. If anyone who was quirked appeared on the server, the founders would reset it completely and private message all members who were deemed safe. If we were injured, normal clinics refused to serve or help us. If I was dying and a quirked person had a broken toe, the quirked person would be admitted first. So instead of a normal clinic, we would use the free clinics that had been set up for villains, vigilantes, and anyone who wouldn't be treated by a normal clinic or couldn't because it would expose their identity. There was no use in the bitterness that I felt every time I thought about something like this. I was used to it. It should be nothing by now. But, if anything, it always made me more irritated every time. As I haphazardly sent my location, a mod responded with the nearest clinic and added, "You're lucky, this one has a quirked healer on shift right now." I smiled with relief. I had already started making half-formed plans on what to tell Mom. But that wouldn't be needed anymore if the healer would help me. I sent a thank you back and watched as the messages got deleted so no one would be able to see my location. I turned a corner inside as I walked to the free clinic, following directions on my phone until I saw the grimy alleyway this one was in. This wasn't fair. This would never be fair. Certainly wasn't my first run-in with a free clinic, so I knew a few things. When I opened the door, however, I didn't expect to run into a villain head first. I was knocked over, my broken arm hitting the ground as I bit back a pained scream. I was helped up a second later, the villain giving me what looked like an apologetic look from behind his bandana. Stain, I recognized, my eyes widening as I waved my uninjured arm back and forth in the air and stuttering in a panic. "I am sorry Mr. Stain, sir." Stain regarded me for a moment before silently brushing past, leaving the alleyway. I just now realized that tears were pricking my eyes, and how my broken arm was hurting even more than before. When I looked down at it, I paled. I was used to treating my own wounds, so of course I knew what I looked like when injured, bloody, burned. But my arm was now twisted in 2 places, bending in unnatural ways. I carefully moved my arm and cradled it to my chest once more as I walked in. A well-known vigilante, crawler, or was it the crawler, I'm not sure, was in here for what seemed to be a broken ankle. "Oh, hey kid," Crawler greeted, wincing slightly when he saw my arm. I nodded to him, and then someone called, "Crawler, you're next." Crawler looked at me for a moment and said, "Go ahead, I can wait." He didn't know why I was here, didn't know my quirk status, but I was grateful anyways, sending a smile his way and managing to speak clearly as I said, "Thank you. I didn't say any of that. You didn't have to bullshit. That was obvious. He chose to." I walked into the small room at the back most clinics had, and the healer didn't even blink an eye at the fact I wasn't Crawler. I bounced excitedly on my toes, a mutter storm taking over. How does her quirk work? Is it like Recovery Girls? Does she have to set a bone before healing it? I wonder if she can reverse the effects of her healing. Probably not. Does it feel warm, make a glow? It's such a useful quirk. She could help so many people. I wonder why she's not a hero. Actually, is she a hero? Maybe. Sorry. I apologized quickly, a warm pink washing over my cheeks as I realized I was muttering again. Besides, what could a useless Deku like me figure out by talking to myself? Kaken already told me I have stalker notebooks, and it's hard in class if I mutter. Everyone laughs. I shrunk in on myself slightly. She'll still treat me right. She just gave me soft smile, a knowing look, and then murmured, "Quirkless, huh?" I inclined my head slightly, hoping that the smile from earlier meant she would treat me and my stupid Deku self and not take offense over the fact I like to mutter. "This will hurt like a bitch, but I don't have anything for you to bite, so do your best to be quiet," she ordered, taking my arm in her hands. I nodded, biting my cheek. Her hands started glowing, and she quickly twisted my arm into position. My teeth sunk into my cheek, the metallic taste in my mouth signifying the blood I drew. I didn't scream, but I cut back a muffled whimper. The pain lasted for only a second, and then a comfortable warmth was taking over my arm. I didn't grow tired like recovery girls' patients had reported they had, but I did find the warmth grew to be almost uncomfortable before I heard a faint pop. She let go of my arm and smiled tiredly, wiping sweat from her brow. ''Th, thank you," I stuttered, my face turning beet red as I realized I was talking to a rather attractive girl. "No problem," she said cheerily, waving me out. When I left, Crawler gave me a smile, or I think he did. He was wearing some weird medical mask before standing on one leg and crouching down to place his hands on the ground and slide forwards. My eyes widened. That was such a cool quirk. I wonder how fast he can go, and what other attributes the quirk has. Can he slide up vertical surfaces as well? Is it actual sliding or air manipulation? Maybe not air, but different ways he can use surfaces? Can he manipulate the surface of objects? Probably not. Many quirks defy any laws of nature and science, so maybe this is one of them. I wonder if he can reverse the polarity of his quirk. I've heard he doesn't know how to stop, based on what I've seen from 𝗔𝗵𝗲. And using some common sense, maybe he should just try to go the opposite direction to stop himself. And based on the way he crouched down like that, and that one foot wasn't available, I'm assuming it's a quirk that requires 3 points of contact. Does his costume have any padding? It looks to only be an all-might hoodie. He should probably get another means of protection. I snapped my mouth shut when I realized I was muttering again. Thankful Crawler hadn't mentioned it. Did he just not hear it? And had continued into the room. The light pink dusted my cheeks. Muttering was stupid. If I couldn't stop it, I really was worthy of the name Deku. Then again, it was a far cry from when I first started off as a child. I used to just talk at a normal voice level. I opened the door to the free clinic and glanced around before leaving. I wrinkled my nose at the smell of the alleyway, but lingered for a moment. If I ever had to run away, I would probably be sleeping in an alleyway just like this one. The statistics for the quirkless were not good, to say the least. Over 45% of quirkless people died before the age of 15, 42% of that being suicide and the rest being assault. Not many frees, as we like to call ourselves, made it very far in life. We had to work extra hard, be the top of our class, and even then, we would only be able to get a job at a fast food restaurant and maybe an office. If we were lucky, we had done the math ourselves with everyone on the Discord server, freebies, who had come up with that name. And it turned out that one person had a good, supportive parent, 90% had abusive parents, whether that be physical, sexual, verbal, or negligent. 9% had parents like my mom who thought we were too fragile, and 1% had parents who didn't care, but still fed them and gave them shelter. That was only a rough estimate, as new people sometimes joined and it changed the percentage. I was happy for the person who had caring parents. Why didn't I get caring parents? What about my dad who abandoned us because of me? But I was also a tad bit jealous. What would it be like, having someone who cared? Being able to go home and eat any flavored food I wanted. Being able to stay up late, take long showers, learn to do new things, pursue my dreams. No use in dreaming. It's not going to happen, I thought bitterly, my fists clenching by my sides. I flexed my arm, grinning when I realized it felt better than before I broke it. My entire body felt better, even weight. I pulled down the collar of my shirt and looked at my shoulder, where a raw, blistered burn mark should be. Instead, the hand-shaped wound had scarred over. She healed everything, didn't she? I realized, my eyes widening. That knowing look hadn't been because she knew I was insecure about my muttering, or even because she sort of recognized the difficulties of being ashamed, embarrassed, and quirkless. It was because she knew I was being bullied. How old is she? I thought back to her appearance, and realized that she was younger than I originally thought. She looked to be in high school. The white hair had thrown me off. I swallowed. Even if she was in high school, why would she remember a Deku like me? Closing my eyes, I ignored how dangerous it was, that I was already in a secluded alleyway and would be an amazing punching bag for an angry Kaken. I got a vague memory of something. A girl with light green hair that draped across half of her face, angry shouting, explosions, glowing hands, warmth. She had gone to 𝗲𝗲. My eyes snapped open with the realization. She had gone to 𝗲𝗲 and she had stood up for me. Her hair must have been dyed, but I couldn't remember if her roots were white back then. Or maybe her hair turns white when she uses her ability. It might make sense. She doesn't take anything from us. She might sap her energy instead. But how would that contribute to? I stopped before it could turn into a mutter storm, hefting my backpack on my shoulders and checking my phone. It was 4:50. I needed to get home in 10 minutes. Mom would freak out if I got home late. I speed walked out, looking around the mostly deserted streets. Where was everyone? An explosion fired from up ahead, and my eyes widened. Hero fight. I took off running in the direction of the explosions, passing a man who seemed to be above 7 feet tall. He was practically skin and bones and was really slow, the white shirt and sweatpants he was wearing hanging off his body. When I got there, I shoved through the crowd, not bothering to say excuse me. When I made it to the front, I squinted, barely able to see anything through the thick smoke. I coughed, leaning over and practically hacking my lungs out. The smoke dissipated soon, however, and I found myself staring at a huge goo villain that had what appeared to be a middle school kid inside of it. What are the heroes doing? Was the first thought that registered in my mind. They weren't doing anything, instead making a show of getting beaten by the villain while they were struggling with a kid. The person was growing weaker, explosions slower. If they didn't go in soon, the kid was going to die. Where was All Might? He was patrolling around here today. As the explosions grew weaker and weaker, I caught a glimpse of spiky blonde hair and red eyes, and I was moving before I could even think. It was 𝐭𝐻𝐿. He was the last person I wanted to save, but he was still someone. And he wasn't just a faceless person that I would pass by on the street and never think about again. He was going to be a hero if he could get his act together. He was going to do great things. It was practically his destiny. And why should useless Deku get to live and contribute nothing to society while someone who was able to help people died? If me dying was the way to save someone, no matter how terrible they had been or were, then I was okay with that. I was okay with death. I didn't know if I would fade to nothing, or if an afterlife existed, but I did know that it was probably better than anything this life would give me. Pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. And that was how I found myself breaking through the perimeter heroes created, running determinedly towards the villain and leaning down to scoop up pieces of debris, throwing the small ones at his eyes as I went. That was how I found myself picking up a large chunk of broken asphalt and spinning, throwing with perfect aim and nailing the villain in the eye, allowing 𝐭𝐻𝐿 to get a breath. That was how I found myself grabbing 𝐭𝐻𝐿's arm and pulling, despite how weak I was, trying to save him. That was how I decided to use 𝐭𝐻𝐿 as a stepping stone, crawling up the villain and getting to the back, getting largely ignored. And that all lead to me grabbing 2 pencils and stabbing that villain in the eyes, shoving as hard as I could and burying my hands. I held on no matter how much I was thrown around. No matter how I felt the villain's body grow weaker beneath me and attempt to swallow me whole. My hands were warm, so unbelievably warm. Explosions blasted below me, and then the villain was collapsing, the sludge oozing over concrete as I hit the ground, scraping my forearm. But otherwise uninjured. I almost threw up at the chunks of flesh that were present clenched in my fists. Red was splattered all over me, making it look like a murder scene. Chunks of flesh stuck to my pencils, my arms. The smell was worse than anything. It was as if something was rotting, but metallic, and not at all how blood was supposed to smell. Blood and flesh weren't supposed to smell rotten. They were supposed to stay in the body. Thank you very much. The smell of rotten flesh and metal coated my tongue, and I gagged. I looked over and felt faint as I saw 𝐭𝐻𝐿 was passed out. Is he okay? How did I even survive if 𝐭𝐻𝐿 got hurt? I shrank in on myself, my eyes watering as I gagged again, but swallowed bile. My throat burned and I stared at 𝐭𝐻𝐿 as heroes ran over, starting to yell and berate me. My eyes stung as I tucked my head down, whispering apologies that never carried to their ears. Kid, we're gonna have to take you in, 𝐷eath_𝗵𝗲 stated gruffly. I swallowed and nodded, doing my best to appear confident but miserably failing. As 𝐒𝐭𝐲 helped me to my feet, my mind seemed disconnected, hardly able to recognize what was happening as I was led away. I blinked, the details catching up to me, and I finally twisted my arm out of his grip and ran to the nearest trash can as I puked. I gagged again as I heard it splat at the bottom of the bin. A hand awkwardly patted my back, seeming to try and either soothe me. I'm not good at comforting people, 𝐒𝐿𝐲 admitted after a moment. I let off a choked laugh as I wiped my mouth. I spat into the trash can, trying to clear the taste, and failed miserably. The trash can now reeked of bile, so I slid backwards away from it, and my arm was being gently gripped again as I was led to a nearby police station. I was sure I was pale and sickly, and the red-stained pencils and hands littered with chunks of flesh wasn't helping the image. I looked like a child villain, like 𝗁𝗏, right now. I swallowed, thankful the taste of blood had been stripped from my tongue when I threw up. I wondered if my mom would give me food tonight. She might stop me from eating as punishment for doing this entire thing, as I was under no illusion that they wouldn't be contacting my guardian. So what's your quirk? The wooden hero asked. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should lie or not, but I need to know if he's a safe hero. If I get treated like shit for this, it'll be okay as long as I can warn everyone else, I decided. I'm Quirkless, I told him, twisting my fingers together until it hurt. ... Oh. I burst out laughing at the reaction, but I was practically hysterical as tears poured down my cheeks. It was funny, but it wasn't that funny. It turned to sobbing as I was silently led into the station. I barely managed to pay attention as 𝐒𝐿𝐲 horribly failed in his attempt to comfort me. He's safe at least, I noticed, my shoulders shaking as I curled in on myself in a chair. When did I get in a chair? my arms clenching my legs to my chest as I smeared even more blood on my clothing. "What the hell?" someone asked, but I didn't have the focus or energy to look up at who it was. I heard some muttering, and then a soothing hand was pressing into my back, rubbing small circles. "Breathe with me, okay?" a voice asked and ordered all at the same time. I follows the instructions and breathing of a voice. It was familiar, scarily familiar, but I was still drowning, and read, and couldn't place it. After what seemed to be hours, but was probably only a few minutes, my tears slowed to a stop. I looked up at the man who had comforted me, who had helped me, and saw a tired face. He was wearing a fully black outfit, with what seemed to be a support scarf and goggles, but even without the support wear I would notice this hero anywhere. This was the man that gave me hope when my mother said I was too fragile to become a hero. This was the man who fought practically quirkless, especially against mutants. This was a man who had probably gotten bullied for his quirk, but had become the best underground hero anyways. Eraserhead, I breathed. My eyes widened as I stared up at him. He seemed surprised that I recognized him, and I realized how terrible I probably looked. "I am really sorry, sir," I stuttered. Dropping the bloody pencils, I realized I still gripped tightly in my hands. I went to wipe them off on my shirt, but Eraserhead caught my wrists, unfazed by the blood, and raised a brow. "Let's get you cleaned up first, kid. No reason to get your clothes any dirtier." His voice was rough, but somehow soft at the same time. He wasn't calling me fragile, he wasn't being hostile. Surely 𝐒𝐭𝐲 had told the man my quirk status by now. Not that I had ever thought Eraser wouldn't be safe. "You liar." I swallowed thickly and nodded. Eraser released his grip on my wrists and led me to a bathroom. Without a word, he rolled up my sleeves for me, so I wouldn't have to get them even bloodier than they already were. I felt guilty for a moment when I saw his red hands. But then I was numb again, the faint feeling gone as I washed my hands and saw the water run red, then clear. Chunks of bloody flesh didn't manage to go down the drain, however, and I felt sick all over again. Eraser calmly washed his red hands, then dried them, passing me a paper towel so I could do the same. I knew that if I was fully connected to reality, I would be too embarrassed to look at him. Instead, I dried my hands, pulled a notebook out of my, thankfully, spotless yellow backpack. I held a pen and asked hesitantly, Can I get an autograph?" My voice was rough and cracked some, but I held out a shaky arm with a pen and notebook. Eraserhead slowly took the items and signed the notebook, handing it back to me. Tears welled up in my eyes again, and I sniffled, but walked with him back out into the lobby, past the bloody pencils on the floor, and into a room. A detective was sitting down, an empty seat beside him and a lone chair on the opposite end of a table. This felt like an interrogation, and it hadn't even started yet. "His quirk is that he can tell if you're telling a lie or truth," Eraser informed me. I perked up a little bit. That was so amazing, perfectly suited for a detective. But I was too tired and my brain too foggy to be able to analyze his quirk. Later I would understand that I had been in a state of shock, partially disconnected from the world around me. "I'm Detective 𝗧𝗵𝗲. What is her name, age, and quirk?" the detective asked. I fiddled anxiously and replied, "Izuku Midoriya. I am 14, and I'm quirkless." The detective raised a brow and gave Eraser a look. He seemed surprised, but not hostile. More safe people, I dimly recognized. "So, Midoriya, what happened?" I managed to squeak out, from the beginning. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 gave an encouraging nod, and I glanced up at Eraser, who was leaning against the wall in the corner. I was walking down the street and heard some explosions. I really liked to analyze her O's, so I went to where I thought the fight was. When I got there, I wondered why the heroes weren't doing anything. They just left 𝐭𝐴𝐲 there and didn't try to help him. I paused and took a breath, already used to stuttering and my voice cracking when I was nervous. And I knew that All Might was seen patrolling there recently. But he didn't appear. When I realized it was 𝐭𝐴𝐲 and that W was being killed, I couldn't stop. "I am sorry, my legs just moved on their own." I swallowed thickly. "Am I going to jail for this?" So I made my way to the villain and threw rocks and debris at its only weak spot. I could see the eyes. It let 𝐭𝐴𝐲 get enough air that he wouldn't DD. I shook my head, unable to choke out the word. The thought that 𝐭𝐴𝐲 could die but I knew it would be pointless to just claw at the villain. I tried to pull 𝐭𝐴𝐲 out, but the sludge was too strong. So I climbed up it and used my pencils to stab it in the eyes. My face paled again as I gagged. The smell of rotten blood and red filling my vision. "Oh good, what did it was the villain dead? Is the villain okay? Did it kill him?" I gulped and shook my head. Is the villain okay?" I asked hesitantly, my voice breaking, looking up from my hands and barely able to meet the eyes of the detective before I looked down again. Permanently blinded, but otherwise alive and in stable condition, Eraserhead spoke up. My shoulders relaxed a fraction. Was I a bad person for being relieved the villain was okay? Only a useless Deku like me would be worried for a villain. "Who's 𝐭𝐴𝐲?" 𝗧𝗵𝗲 prompted, leaning forwards and propping his chin on his fist. His name is Katsuki Bakugo, but I've always called him Kaken, I informed the detective, hiding the bitterness I felt inside. Kaken was a bad person, but he would be a good hero. He would be a good. I slumped in my seat, curling my knees into my chest. Okay, we'll contact your guardian, but other than that, you're free to go, Tsukachi informed me. I tensed, but nodded anyways, giving a small smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Considering my muddled mind and brain, I wouldn't notice or recall the look that Eraser sent the detective, wouldn't notice the concealed alarm that was hidden in his gaze. I wouldn't notice the concern, but I would still believe those two were some of the nicest heroes any Freeze would hope to meet. And was Tsukachi technically a hero? No, but in my eyes, anyone who accepted us as we were was a hero. Anyone who wasn't rude or mean or disrespectful. Anyone who treated us with decency. Someone who didn't see us as fragile, as less than. And I would probably always look back on this day as the catalyst for everything that would happen in the crazy future that made up my life. I groaned, letting my head fall forwards onto my desk with a small thump. I was right. Mom had been mad and didn't let me have any food. I thought back on what had happened earlier with a frown, rolling my neck so that my cheek was resting against the cool surface of the furniture. Izuku Midoriya. I heard the angry exclamation, and turned to find Mom rushing towards me, an angry and worried expression plastered over what seemed to be fury. You scared me, Izuku. You know you're too fragile to be going to hero fights. You're lucky you didn't engage with the villain head-on, you would have died. I glanced over to Eraserhead, and he inclined his head slightly. He didn't tell her, I realized. My muscles relaxed slightly as relief washed over me, better than any massage. I wouldn't be too badly punished now, hopefully, but she still seemed mad. Now you need a new uniform. 𝐒𝐭 scolded me, shaking her head. What excuse did he give her? What did he say? Why is she so mad? The questions ran through my mind, leaving no room for anything else. Come on, baby, let's get you home, Mom stated, gripping my arm tightly and tugging me away from Eraserhead's side. Her nails dug into my arm right below my sleeve, carefully avoiding touching the bloody garment. I despised the fact that she grabbed me and touched me without permission, without asking if it was okay. Sure, she was my mom, but I disliked any form of touch after everything that happened with Kaken. Despite this fact, I didn't have the energy to support myself on my own, my eyes already drooping in contrast to the adrenaline that had rushed through me just 30 minutes before. She pulled us through the city, her nails painful, but nothing on par with what Kaken did to me on a daily basis. We didn't own a car, barely making enough to pay rent, but still making do anyways. Maybe our financial situation would be better if Mom worked more than 1-hour shifts, and we didn't live off the sums of money Father was required to send us every month. You aren't allowed to chase after hero fights anymore, Izuku. And no food for a few days. Maybe that'll make you learn a lesson. 𝐒𝐭 punished, her gaze blazing now that we were out of sight of the heroes. I felt like I was being strangled like Kaken had, about to pass out, exhausted. I was drowning. There was no other way to explain it. The bullying, then hearing I was fragile and weak. Yet the same person who said that, ignoring the injuries I came home with every day. Constantly hearing I was less than, realizing I wouldn't contribute anything to society, and would just become another statistic. The hero analysis was what kept me sane. It gave me something to do, something to live for. No more hero fights meant there were no excuses for being out later, meant there was no way I could do any analysis. Mom wouldn't let me watch TV, either. Her excuse was that I was too fragile and would strain my eyes. And no food. My stomach was already empty. I had thrown it all up. I felt too sick to feel hunger right now, but I knew it would set in later. Maybe I would be able to sneak food or make myself something while Mom went to work for an hour. But it was unlikely as I didn't know how to cook. You're too fragile to use knives, Izu. You might fall off the stool and break your neck, Izu. It's too dangerous for you to be so close to the stove. Izuku, stop trying to help, you're too fragile. I blinked. When did it become Izuku? What happened to Izu? What happened to the softness yet sternness she spoke to me with? I felt like I was going to throw up again. What happened to the concern in her eyes? I looked up and looked at 𝐒𝐭, looked at my mother, the one who always called me fragile. I noticed the minuscule changes that wouldn't have even registered to anyone else. The caring, overprotective, soft-willed 𝐒𝐭. I wondered if she was going to become just another statistic as well. Wondered if that anger would turn to physical violence. This is what you deserve, I reminded myself, my head down as Mom pulled me home. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. Crying was for later. Midoriya tears were practically trademarked for Mom, but I didn't like crying in front of people. It made me embarrassed, and my face always felt sticky afterwards. That didn't stop me from bursting into tears randomly, but it certainly curbed it. Thankfully, my eyes didn't puff up, but if I was sobbing, my voice would become hoarse and crack really easily. Earlier with Eraserhead had been a rarity, something I was able to release because I am still in shock. So when we got home and Mom ordered me to get a 15-minute shower, 5 more minutes allowed than usual because she wanted me to get all of the blood out of my hair, I quickly obliged. Changing out of my clothes and getting the blood off me felt amazing. And only after I had taken 5 minutes to get the blood out of my hair did I break down and cry, curl up into a ball on the shower floor, and allow the feeling of water constantly washing over me to take me away from this place. I wasn't particularly mad about the food issue. I had stored plenty of snacks in here over the years. Chips and small snacks won't last forever. I was upset. I was angry about Mom banning me from hero fights. I breathed in deeply, and I had missed the opportunity to study and analyze Eraserhead. How much of an idiotic, useless fucking Deku am I? I tore open a bag of chips and munched thoughtfully. Maybe if I learned how to hack, I could get out of the parental restrictions Mom put on my computer. Teenage rebellion, I thought humorously, snorting at my own thoughts. It's not even that funny, I recognized, pulling my legs into my chest. I could even track the heroes over the cameras if I got skilled enough. And I could create things to let me give them tips every so often. Yeah, point them towards crimes in progress they might not be able to get to. Maybe. Wouldn't that just be becoming a vigilante? If Kaken can't even be a hero yet, why do I think I could be one? I'm not smart, I'm a stupid Deku. At least, that's what Kaken says. What if he's wrong? I swallowed, resting my face on my hand and staring out my window. The window that was locked and had literal bars restricting me from leaving. This is no better than prison, I thought bitterly, my gaze narrowing. Why me? What did I do to the universe? Setting down my bag of chips and rubbing my greasy fingers off on my pants, I picked my phone up where it rested beside me, the All Might case seeming to glare at me before I flipped it around to see the screen. Why wasn't he there today? Does he just not care? No, maybe it's different. Maybe it's something else. I shook my head, clearing those thoughts away. Maybe he was just caught up with something else. Yeah, that had to be it. He wouldn't just leave Kaken like that and not help him. I searched through the news, looking for possible attacks that he would have participated in, my hope fading, mere ashes in the wind at this point. The more I searched, I couldn't find anything. No matter what backhand sites I went to, no matter where I searched. I even found something where someone filmed All Might chasing the sludge villain and then letting him escape through the sewers. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend what I was seeing for a while. So All Might had fought the villain, but he lost. How did he lose? Deku won. Deku won. But how is that possible? I squeezed my eyes shut. No. It was wrong. The site was wrong. This was all wrong. It felt as if everything had been flipped upside down. This wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't even supposed to be possible. I took a deep breath in, shaking, and opening my eyes. All Might posters from around the room stared at me, judging me, and I couldn't take it. I leapt to my feet and practically tore them off the walls. I hopped onto my chair, frantically pulling down a poster. I fell backwards and landed with a muted thump, the air inside my lungs being forcefully ripped away. I curled into a small ball on my green carpet, choking and coughing, struggling for air before I remembered to breathe. I took gasps of air, shaking slightly as I laid there. I stared at a spot on the wall until my eyes started watering, my vision blurry. I blinked. I stayed there. I breathed. As I calmed down, I slowly stood and walked around, taking down All Might decorations and merch as I went. After I finished, I shoved them all into the back of my closet, piling boxes in front of them. I needed air. The walls felt too close, felt suffocating. Everything was too stuffy, hot. I snatched an Eraserhead hoodie, hoping Mom hadn't woken up when I fell over. Would she even care? I took a deep breath, sliding the hoodie over my head, and tiptoeing down the hallway to the front door and outside, relishing the cold air that washed over my cheeks, turning them light pink. I spread my arms, the sleeves sliding down them as I laughed breathlessly in the wind, my head tilted back. It felt good to be able to sneak out, to defy authority like this. My exhaustion was gone, replaced with exhilaration. Spinning, the air whipped some hair into my eyes. But I didn't mind. I slowed to a stop, shivering slightly when I remembered the cold. I allowed my hoodie to cover my arms again, my breath fanning out in a cloud that looked similar to smoke in the air. I didn't bother trying to be stealthy, but I wasn't particularly loud either. I was naturally quiet, making myself seem smaller than I actually was. This habit drilled into me after a whole life of bullying and harassment. My eyes flickered from side to side, taking in every small detail as I walked through the apartment building, down multiple flights of rickety stairs. A smile was practically glued to my face while I left the area, leaving my phone behind. Was it a good idea to leave my device at home? No, but Mom was able to track my every movement, and it would alert her to my absence the second I left the apartment. My soft steps didn't make any noise as I walked down the still, silent street. It didn't seem too bad on the streets, now that I thought about it. Sure, the alleyways smelled, and it was cold, and probably hard to find food, but it seemed pretty quiet at night. Didn't all of the drug deals and muggings normally happen around midnight, though? I remember checking up on freebies and seeing someone say they had to hide because the alleyway they stayed in was home to a drug deal. They were behind a dumpster the entire time and had moved alleyways the minute the small group left. I knew the silence and the peace was just a facade. Knew a criminal underground was definitely present. There it is, I noticed, hearing a crash and muffled screams and whimpers from a nearby alleyway. I climbed a ladder I had seen perched beside a building moments before. The metal was freezing, but I ignored the temperature in favor of getting up onto the roof to see what was happening. Crouching down, I glanced at the crime taking place, a frown replacing my smile as I watched the scene below. I knew the closest agency was run by midnight, and didn't hesitate to send in an anonymous report of the situation. This was all I could do. I furrowed my brow, watching the scene with growing trepidation. Did this happen every night, with no one to call it in? A large man who looked to have a strength quirk was pinning a woman to a wall with one hand while his other traveled. I shook my head. Come on, heroes. Someone appear, please, please appear. I had to work to keep my body still, to keep myself from running head-on into danger to help the woman. Useless, weak. What are you gonna do without a quirk? Pathetic. Izuku, you're too fragile. I wouldn't be able to do anything helpful anyways. It took a moment to shake off the voices in my head, and another 30 seconds after that to gather the resolve to look back at the scene before me. If you can't even gather the courage to look at this, how would you ever think you could even move to stop it? But I had to restrain myself from running in there in the first place. This was the exact reason I couldn't be a hero or a vigilante. I was too useless to step in and do anything. If I did manage to hack, I wouldn't be able to gather the courage to be able to talk to the heroes anyways. After another minute of watching helplessly, I saw an unnaturally dark shadow twitch, and a hero quickly ran out of it, capture scarf at the ready as he grabbed the man and slammed him to the ground. The pavement cracked under the force of the blow, the villain instantly being knocked out. His movements were so sure, so smooth, that it only could have originated from years of trial and error and success. His outfit and expertise meant it could only be one person, and one I knew well. A small smile found its way to my face as I took in the scene. 𝐸racerhead, the nighttime underground pro hero, saving a woman. It all felt so natural in that moment, like something that was supposed to happen. I threw away any worries about the fact that the heroes couldn't save everyone. It was obvious the problem was handled. You had to call the heroes in yourself, though. The woman thanked him profusely, tears dripping from her cheeks. He simply nodded and glanced around, locking eyes with me for a moment. I don't think he recognized me, realized how young I was, but he just gave me a small nod and left without a word, leading the woman somewhere. My breath hitched as everything that had just happened finally registered in my brain. That was amazing. 𝐸racerhead dealt with that villain so quickly, and it seems his capture scarf is stronger than I believed it to be previously. He also has masterful control over it, of course, but I didn't realize Midnight's agency would send him. That must mean he works in that agency. I have to add that to my notebook. A smile stretched across my face again, delight running through my veins. I made my way down the ladder and back in the direction of the apartment, unaware of the eyes that traced my every move. Unease washed over me as I continued to walk, and paranoia filled my steps as they became quieter, but louder all the same, the soft, barely audible footfalls sounding like jackhammers echoing down the near-silent streets. The sounds of the night became more evident to me, crowding my ears. I twitched at every scrape and rustle coming from alleyways, jumped anytime a stray cat knocked something over, and sometimes I could swear I heard light breathing and footsteps from the roofs of buildings all around me. Maybe being a vigilante would help me feel more secure. I would know anything and everything that happened over the cameras. I never once looked over my shoulder, no longer looking like a carefree idiotic teen, but like someone who was on drugs, twitching and fiddling every few seconds. I was aware that my eyes were bloodshot and tired. I was aware I was pale and twitching. I, quite frankly, looked like I was on drugs and wandering around at night to either sell some or buy more. Me looking around or over my shoulder would just be me appearing to try and find a dealer or customers. But now it came down to the point of why I was anxious. Was someone watching me? No, of course not. I was worthless Deku. Of course no one would care enough. I swallowed down my nervousness and put on a mask, the same one I used around my mother. A forced smile appeared on my face as I stopped myself from twitching, walking stiffly. It sacrificed some of my silence, but I couldn't look like I was on drugs, could I? What if 𝐸racerhead saw me? My smile slowly faded as I walked, the muscles in my face getting sore. When I got home, I felt no better than when I left, exhilaration and happiness fading away like wisps in the wind. I laughed softly, bitterly as I remembered those lights from Brave, an old American movie that was popular hundreds of years ago. What were they called? Will-o'-the-wisps. Happiness, that bright yellow everyone associates it with. Exhilaration, red, almost like my shoes. Running after them and getting so close, only for it to fade and appear just outside of your grasp yet again, never to stay. Silently twisting the handle, I swung the door open as quickly as I could, hoping it wouldn't creak. As I stepped over the threshold, I took in a deep breath, shutting the door behind me with a soft click. I stood there, trembling for a moment right in front of the door, longing for the freedom I had felt just moments prior. I knew it wouldn't last. I knew it would never last. I stayed silent as I made my way back to my bed, sitting down and listening to the creaking of the springs. Would being a vigilante even work? How many heroes do miss something? How many things can only be stopped when you're there in person, patrolling, but they miss it? I went back to the alleyway in my head, wondering if there was a security camera. I'm pretty sure I caught a glimpse of one. Maybe I could help, even a little bit. If I learned to bypass parental controls, I'm sure that I could hack into the city's security footage if I managed to learn hacking. Who knows? I've heard it's tricky. But if I can try to learn it, it shouldn't be that hard. And then I might be able to get specific heroes well suited for the jobs. You're selfish. The only reason you're doing this is because you thought someone was watching you of all people. Give up. The voice of 𝐭𝐻𝐿 rang through my head, my own thoughts becoming words and stating their opinions. No, I'm not only doing this because I'm selfish. I want to help. I want to save people. My lip quivered, my eyes glassy with unseen tears. I squeezed them shut, digging my palms into my eyelids. But what could I do anyways? What could a useless Deku do? I'll just become another statistic. My life doesn't matter. 𝐭𝐻𝐿 is right. I found myself wanting to give in. I wanted to do as 𝐭𝐻𝐿 said, follow through with the simple advice he had given me. Who was to say I wouldn't be born with a quirk in my next life, if I even get one at all? I closed my eyes, imagining the wind whipping through my hair as I plummeted towards the ground. I wondered if I would feel free or numb. Would I be sad or upset? Would I end up regretting it a few seconds before I hit the ground? I exhaled, remembering the way the breeze had felt when I was spinning minutes beforehand. I remembered how free I had felt in that moment, defying authority, doing what I wanted to do. Then again, it wouldn't be what I thought I wanted to do, would it? When I had gone out earlier, no one had suggested it to me. No one had given me advice. I had just decided I needed to leave. I wondered if I could feel that way as a vigilante, on the run from heroes and cops, in life-threatening situations every day. And I had just found the solution, hadn't I? If I died as a vigilante, I would be dying doing something I wanted to do. Mom would say I was too fragile. 𝐭𝐻𝐿 would call me too weak and pathetic. I didn't necessarily have to die, but I would at least feel free, right? But I have to hone my skills first. Anyone can hack. I just have to learn. I have to see the obvious things anyone could, see what situations heroes would be good in. It wasn't that hard, so surely everyone could do it. Eraser would have been good for most things with his expertise. But I knew he would be best suited for fights with people who had very strong quirks and most likely many enemies at a time. I would have to refrain from sending him into fights with mutants, however. Don't get me wrong. I knew he was amazing at his job, but other pros were better suited for mutant-type quirks than he was. Who was I kidding? I was Deku. Why did I think I could do this? I didn't want to inconvenience heroes just to get an adrenaline rush, but I managed to help save someone, even if I wasn't directly involved. If I save someone and die myself, it'll be okay. They're more valuable anyways. So if I can do this, I'll do my best, I decided. I thought back to the sludge villain, to the woman in that alleyway. Then again, I'm worthless, but heroes surely aren't. If even a Deku is confident in their skill to combat something, surely they must be amazing. And even if I was wrong with an analysis, I would still be able to send heroes to fights they might miss. Because surely the security in this city was really good. Surely heroes were amazing. I was just a small link connecting the two. I wasn't really doing anything. So the heroes would be the ones doing everything. I would just be there. That wasn't too bad. Yeah, I could do that. And if I was able to go on the field and do that myself, even illegally, no one would care if I died or not. I didn't really mind death. Mom wouldn't care, 𝐭𝐻𝐿 wouldn't care, Auntie Mitsuki wouldn't care. And really, no one else knew about my existence. Maybe someone on the Discord server would realize, but they were used to it. It would still cause them pain to see another kid die, become just another statistic. So no one would be harmed if I became a vigilante. Only me. I had already gone over the thought of dying in my head, already planned out how I could die in life-threatening situations as a vigilante. It wouldn't be as painless as jumping, but it would be something. I really wasn't worth anything, was I? Maybe I could do some more research, because this was still illegal. I could talk myself out of it, talk myself out of the thought of dying. I had always heard of death being described as a blissful numb. And oh, how I wished I could feel like that, even for a second. I shook my head and pulled out my laptop from my nightstand, inputting the search and finding my eyes widening. The Hero Public Safety Commission Statement. Vigilantism is the unlawful use of a quirk to do work otherwise given to heroes without owning or having possession of a hero license. I choked on my spit. Couldn't be a vigilante. That law wouldn't allow me to be one, as there was no quirk for me to use. So I wouldn't technically be breaking any laws. The thing that was supposed to talk me out of becoming a vigilante had just set the very foundation for me to become one. I swapped over to Discord quickly, deciding to post the names of the new safe heroes onto the list before I got to work on anything that had to do with being a vigilante. I needed to learn how to make support gear, how to hack. It couldn't be so hard, right? Besides, learning this might allow me to join the UA support course. I couldn't be a hero, but maybe I could help them out. And if I go into support, I'm not really doing anything, so Kaken won't be upset. I frowned as I realized that the support course in becoming a support gear designer and creator was supposed to be challenging for even the most academically adept individual. Maybe I wasn't cut out for support, but I could still try my best, right? And if by some miracle I was able to work with inventions, I wouldn't be any good at it, most likely only being able to create small support items. Useless Deku. What'll you be able to do? You're worthless, you got that. Stupid fucking Deku, thinking you're all smart. You'll never amount to anything. I shivered, shrinking in on myself, an instinct. Make yourself small, unnoticeable. Hide in the darkest shadows and avoid any loud noises. But don't allow it to be too quiet, either. That would only mean trouble. Going to UA would only mean trouble, would only bring hurt. There would surely be more amazing heroes with great quirks like Kaken, and there would only be more people to bring me pain. And the teachers would join in on it too. They have strong, powerful, amazing quirks and have done amazing things with them. Why would they see a stupid weak Deku like me and decide to not prey on the weak? My newfound goals shriveled up in my mind as I closed my laptop with a snap, pushing it to the side. I had already killed the dream of becoming a hero. Now I had just destroyed another idea of becoming a support student within a second of thinking about it. Laying there for a moment, I closed my eyes and curled around myself again, a welcome sleeping habit. I curled around the Eraserhead hoodie, the present mic blanket, and left my phone on the desk, silently judging me, the 𝐒𝐵𝐼𝐺 graveyard in my closet seeming to whisper insults throughout the night. I abandoned my pillow completely, tightly gripping my blanket, pulling some of it at and over my head to act as a makeshift pillow and block my view of everything else. I nestled deeper into my oversized hoodie and did my best to sleep, but the only thing I could see every time I closed my eyes was red, red, red. I gave in and sleepily stumbled over to my desk, snatching headphones. Mom would kill me if she realized I wore these to sleep. In my phone, I wirelessly connected the two and played some music. As the beat echoed through my head and blocked out any other thoughts, I finally managed to bury myself in my blanket and fall asleep, my eyes slowly blinking closed. It seemed to be only seconds before I woke to the sound of my All Might-themed alarm clock shouting, "It is time to start the day." Like a hero. Yes, I had taken down my All Might merch last night, but I would need another alarm clock before I could put it in the graveyard with everything else. Groaning, I rolled over and smacked it off the nightstand, listening contently as it clattered onto the floor, the voice distorting in the middle of a sentence and shutting off. If possible, I was even more tired than when I went to sleep. I curled back into my blanket once more, imagining the bliss in some of my dreams, the feeling of waking up slowly, not being able to quite grasp the images that floated around your head at night, but knowing it was pleasant. Starting the day energized, my thoughts were cut off when I heard a knock on the door. Who could that be? I wondered, my muddled brain not comprehending the fact that it was, in fact, my mother. Yes, I called sleepily, not ready to leave the warmth of my bed. "Izuku, it's time to wake up. And that's another day of food gone if you're late," the woman shouted through the door. I blinked, noticing my headphones lay beside me on the bed, rolling out of said bed and onto the floor with a thump, barely missing my carpet. Well, that woke me up at least. Despair was starting to settle in. 𝐭 used to call softly through the door, used to be pleasant, non-threatening. If I thought hard enough, I could remember the feeling of being safe in my father's arms. Taking a deep breath in, I walked over to the door and opened it, coming face to face with Mom. "What about my uniform?" I questioned, my voice slightly deeper and cracking. I held back a groan. My voice was always like this before I had a long, warm drink in the morning. That, or I just mumbled to myself a lot on the way to school and my voice would eventually decide to work again. Mom had allowed me to walk on my own at the beginning of 7th grade, which was last year. Mom looked at me for a moment before sighing and muttering, "I threw out your old one. The new uniform hasn't come in yet. You'll just have to find a shirt and some pants that work from the lost and found. Go, get ready. I'm not packing you lunch. No food, remember." I nodded, tears only filling my eyes when she turned her back. "We have lunch at school, so it should be fine. I'll be okay. One meal a day will suffice until I can have food again." I pivoted smoothly on my heel, closing the door behind me as I entered my room. It wasn't hard to get ready for school, I just needed to grab my bag. I didn't see the need to fix my hair. It would end up being ruined by 𝐭𝐚𝐲 anyways. Pulling the mustard yellow backpack over my shoulder, I trudged out of my room, past Mom, down the stairs, and out of the apartment building. The feeling of someone watching me never fully faded. Even as I stumbled to school in pajama pants, the unyielding sun shone down on me, and I sighed at the heat. Chewing on my lip, I debated whether I would be able to avoid 𝐭𝐚𝐲 long enough to change. Probably not, I recognized, staring at the pavement as my mind wandered. The only way I would have kept trying was if All Might himself had told me I could be a hero. That was my last hope, being able to meet All Might and ask him face to face. If he had said I could be a hero, I would have put everything being me. I would have forgiven 𝐭𝐚𝐲. I would have tried to think better of myself. But realistically speaking, I would never get to see him face to face. And after what happened yesterday, I don't know if I would believe him anymore. Sure, it was only one hero fight he missed, but that hero fight had meant something. 𝐭𝐚𝐲 would have been seriously injured. He would have died if I didn't step in. I swallowed down my nerves as I got closer to the school, looking up and starting to pay more attention. I'm pretty sure that was the only reason I heard a familiar voice cackling in an alleyway. Fingers, I recognized, my steps becoming softer as I peered around the corner of the alleyway. I didn't know the names of anyone in the class besides Tsubasa and 𝐭𝐚𝐲. No one else offered the courtesy of introducing themselves to me, and the teachers didn't care what our class did, so there were no introductions. All I could do was call them by the nicknames 𝐭𝐚𝐲 did, but never speak those names aloud. Lo and behold, Fingers was standing there in all of his glory, the fingers that provided him with his name elongated and poking a kid in the chest. They had blue hair and green eyes, a small spiky tail anxiously curling around their middle. Their arms clutched a bag of food tight to their body, tears flowing down their face. I didn't do anything to you," they cried, clenching their eyes shut. I forced myself to stay still yet again. Stupid instincts. I was going to do something. There was no way I could stand there, but what could I even do? "Midoriya, stop distracting the class with your nonsense and get to your desk. You get distracted too easily, Deku. It was so easy to pin you for cheating. He just wants attention. And he does that by distracting the students. I won't allow him to continue at the school if this keeps happening. Miss Midoriya, your muttering is so distracting and creepy, you freak." Distracting. That'll work. Hopefully I can distract Fingers for long enough that the mutant kid can get away, I quickly analyzed. Not doing the best at ignoring the voices in my head. Who knew that bullying from 𝐭𝐚𝐲 could help me? I mean, it helped me realize how useless I am. But other than that, it's just painful. Time to put on a good show. I didn't care for my own well-being, so I wasn't nervous as I stepped forwards and asked, "And what are you doing?" My voice was cold, but I quickly glanced back at the mutant and mouthed, "Run." The second Fingers turned to face me. They sprinted away, already sobbing. Fingers growled, his head snapping back around as his prey escaped. "Damn you." He was already stalking forwards. "You're going to regret that, Deku." I noticed one thing. He was bullying me, but where was 𝐭𝐚𝐲? 𝐭𝐚𝐲 didn't like it when others took away his privilege to bully me. Oh, and Bakugo isn't here today. He's still in the hospital, so no one can stop me, Fingers exclaimed, a wide, unhinged grin spreading across his face. Well, that explains it. Movement flashed in my peripheral vision, and I glanced over, a dark figure already whizzing by me and smashing into Fingers. I caught a glimpse of red, black, a blur of beige, or was that gray? Before I saw the look on Fingers' face, I swallowed this time as I took a step back, my eyes widening at the shadowy figure that stood over the other boy. I would be lying if I said I didn't gain satisfaction from the pained expression Fingers wore, the absolute paralyzing fear that could be found in his gaze. It reminded me of, well, me. I immediately took 2 steps backwards, watching with wide eyes as I saw the villain standing over Fingers. He was so recognizable, so sure with his movements that I found myself staring, my head tilting sideways. I wonder what his quirk is. He's managed to take out so many pros, so it must be powerful. He seems like he's used to using blades, and his movements are so sure. I wonder if his nose being gone is a part of his quirk. I know his tongue is really long, so that factors into it. Toga has a blood-related quirk and she has fangs. Vlad King also had a blood-related quirk. Maybe he has one too. The amount of knives he has on him might indicate that. But then again, he could just be well prepared. The world caught back up with me as I froze, mouth stopping and eyes widening as I actually took in who I was looking at for the first time. The villain from the free clinic, the one I stumbled into. Stained. I did my best not to hyperventilate as the fluid motions seemed to come naturally to him. Raising his katana above his head with 2 hands on the hilt, he stated, "Hero society is cruel. You may be young, but the only way for your corruption to end is through being called like the rest of those corrupt people who call themselves heroes." Fingers didn't have the breath to scream, his eyes wide and terrified as the villain dug his face into the ground with a boot, gravel and grime crunching slightly. Blood already stained the area by Fingers' head. Red, 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 red everywhere. Not the time, Deku. I ordered myself, my gaze riveting back onto the scene before me. I watched, almost entranced by the way the damaged katana glinted in the light, the danger it represented far from my mind. It looked so pretty, so deadly, the opposite of my weak Deku self. As Stain started to bring the katana down, I snapped out of my reverie. Wait, I called, instinctively moving forwards, my hand outstretched. The weapon paused just an inch from Finger's chest, and the noseless villain was looking over his shoulder at me, red scarf waving behind him even though there was no wind to be found. Why, you don't need to, I paused, hesitation evident in my gaze and stance. What am I doing? A Deku can't stop a famous deadly villain. I don't think reasoning will work, but I have to try. He might be bad now, but look at his quirk. He'll never be a hero. My voice was soft, and my gaze downcast as I stated this. It's not only because of his quirk, but because of his personality and record. He gets suspended every 2 weeks, and there are too many marks in his history. Huey wouldn't even let him in for an entrance exam. I looked up at Stain, and determination could be seen in my eyes. A hearty dose of fear was also found there, but at least I could speak legibly. And who knows, he might be able to change. If you want to kill someone, kill me instead. I won't contribute anything to society anyways. I stepped within reach of Stain's katana, pleading with him, begging for my bully's life. There are many false heroes that must be culled, but I think you're worth keeping around. Fine, I'll spare him now, but next time I won't be as merciful, Stain decided, his katana twirling gracefully and cutting off one of Finger's fingers. Fingers passed out with a blood-curdling scream, and Stain was standing, leaping, gone a moment later into the shadows he seemed to be born in. I didn't call an ambulance. I didn't get Finger's help. A relieved sigh escaped past my lips, and I turned, walking out of the alleyway and towards school once more. I would bargain for Finger's life, but I wouldn't go out of my way to help him. How terrible am I if even a villain thinks I should stick around? I murmured, walking in the school gates. How terrible am I if I can just leave him there? I questioned myself, squeezing my eyes shut. The noise of all of the students was overwhelming me, reminding me of the one still in the alleyway. I couldn't do this. Turning, guilt already present in my carefully masked expression, I walked back towards the alleyway, pulling out my phone as I did so. I swallowed, deciding it would be best to go with Midnight's agency again. You just want to see Eraserhead? No. They have an open investigation into Stain. They've asked for any information to be presented to them. I'm not being selfish. I tried to convince myself. But really, I knew I just wanted to see Eraserhead again. Knew I was only doing this so I could apologize for everything I had done the day prior. As someone picked up the phone and asked what I needed, I responded, hello. Me and a classmate just saw Stain and Stain attacked him. I'm sorry for your loss, the person replied. And no, I managed to talk Stain out of killing him, but Stain cut off one of his fingers and now he's passed out in an alleyway, I explained, glancing into the alleyway with a swallow. A hero is on their way to your location. He will ask you questions and make sure your friend gets medical attention. Do you need anything else? And no, thank you, I stuttered, and then hung up, turning off the phone and slipping it into my pocket. I walked into the alleyway, carefully keeping my gaze averted. Blood hadn't made me uncomfortable before. I'll probably get over it soon. It's not a big deal. I took a few deep breaths, thankful the blood actually smelt like blood and not rot. Maybe that's just something to do with the sludge villain. I'm pretty sure the only flesh he has are his eyes, so maybe that's a unique reaction to literal chunks of it being taken away. Then again, I'm pretty sure I heard something like skin suit. Did the villain say that? And didn't he mention a powerful quirk? Can he use the quirk of the person he goes into, possesses? I'm just gonna go with possesses because he probably kills them, but I have no other word for it. I wonder if he could use their quirks to the fullest extent, and how he would get out of his new skin suit. Could he see again? I did permanently blind him, but what if he can use the eyes of the person he possesses? His quirk is really interesting. I don't think I've seen anything like it. Was he born like that, or did he slowly change into sludge? If he slowly turned, he was probably terrified. My muttering was cut off when someone landed right in front of me in the alleyway. Sure enough, Eraserhead stood there, a completely done expression on his face. Kid, he greeted. Eraserhead, I managed to stutter back, my head low. I am sorry for yesterday. Eraserhead raised a brow and replied, you saved a friend with only pencils. And if it's more on the emotional aspect, you don't need to apologize for that, kid. I shrunk in on myself. I didn't really do anything. The heroes had it under control, right? No, they didn't, you idiot. Eraserhead looked down at Fingers and sighed. Name? He asked. I blushed slightly and replied softly, no one really told me their names, so I only have the nicknames Kakin calls them. What does he call him? Eraserhead asked, already crouched beside Fingers. Fingers, I managed, my face bright red. Eraserhead snorted. It's because he can grow his fingers, not a very powerful quirk, although in some settings it could be useful. If he was a security guard, how fast can he grow his fingers though? He might have to practice that. But if he was a security guard and could grow his fingers fast enough, he might be able to stop a thief by tripping them. And if he did become a hero, he could try to grow his fingers long enough to catch them quickly. I had to lie to Stain. Fingers can become a hero if he trains enough. I mean, Eraserhead fights practically quirkless, so Fingers could too. You have some good analysis. You do realize you could sell that, right? Eraserhead asked, picking up Fingers. It's not that good. And besides, no one would take analysis from someone without a quirk, so it's useless anyways. I told him, my arms wrapped around my middle. Eraser hummed and thought for a moment, an almost bitter look passing over his face before he said, let's get to the station then, shall we? What? I asked, my eyes widening in confusion, taking a step back and my hands up. I didn't do anything wrong, I swear, I started, tears pricking my eyes. You're over-exaggerating this entire situation, calm down. You really are an idiot. Am I being taken in for conspiring with a villain or something? You're not in trouble, kid. We have to take you in and ask a few questions. I won't alert your mom if that makes you feel any better, he offered, his gaze narrowing slightly, as if he was trying to test something. She'll find out anyways. She can see my location, I murmured, crossing my arms around my middle. And even if she couldn't, the school would tell her I was late and she would be upset anyways. Eraserhead shrugged, then motioned for me to follow him as we walked down the crowded streets, no one noticing the presence of a pro hero. It made sense, he was an underground, after all. With a grin, I followed him, finally taking the chance to analyze him. I pulled out the notebook he signed, at least I was functioning enough to ask, and started writing down my observations on a page. This notebook was one that allowed me to blurt out all my thoughts, and then I would organize them later into another volume. His steps seemed to be naturally silent, and he's definitely strong enough to carry Fingers, so he can easily lift over 100 pounds. As I noted earlier, his capture scarf seems to be stronger than I realized, and I'm pretty sure that's how he travels around so quickly. With the help of the scarf, he could essentially become Spider-Man. Eraser glanced over his shoulder at my mumbling, but just tilted his head almost fondly and looked forwards again. He must be able to either see me or sense my presence. I wonder if he can sense where people are based on their quirks. That would be a pretty cool aspect of Erasure, as his quirk is called. But based on how I don't have a quirk, he must be able to sense or see me. Does he have a sort of sixth sense he's honed over the years as a hero? No, I'm not dangerous, so I don't think that would activate for me. He probably can hear my footsteps and breathing, maybe feel my body heat. I'm also muttering right now, so that's most likely an indication. I wonder how long his hours are. With his job at UA, he probably can't work during the day during the normal year. This time, however, he's here because he expelled his entire class on the first day. Some might think him cruel, but he most likely didn't see any potential and didn't want to get them killed. I wonder if he's the lead hero on the Stain case and that's why he was called in. Pretty interesting what he's assigned. I'm pretty sure he's the informal #1 underground hero, but I'll have to do more digging into the forums to see their conversations. I think they're the only people who use them, but if you sign in and know what their number is, you can see their chats. The forum is good, however, because everyone's username is a random number, so no one knows theirs. I wonder if Erasure will make his hair float if he's upside down. His hair naturally floats when he activated his quirk when he's right side up, so it doesn't hinder his vision, so it probably won't float if he's upside down. But it would be fun to check. I stopped mumbling when I tripped over my own feet walking into the station, Eraser easily transferring Fingers to his shoulder with one arm and catching me with another. Thank you, I murmured, my face red as the hero released me from his hold. He just gave a nod, dropping Fingers off in the med bay and bringing me to the same room as before. Leaning against the wall in the corner stood Eraser, just the same as before. I found it slightly comforting that they hadn't moved. It created more of a sense of familiarity, even if I was in shock last time. I still swallowed, my leg bouncing as I shifted in the chair. I twisted my fingers together until they hurt. Fingers was going to have to deal with that as well to help ground me to the situation as I looked up and briefly met the detective's gaze before I was staring at my hands. Well, kid, you seem to have a magnet for trouble, the detective commented, putting a recording device down on the table and stating the date, time, and my name. What exactly happened? Tsukachi asked, raising a brow. I gulped, then started. Well, I winced as I realized I was a stuttering mess, but continued again. I was defending someone from a bully, and once they ran he turned to me, as so he was about to attack me. And this blur rushes by. I paused when I saw Tsukachi's hand twitch, my face lighting up when I realized it was a sign of his power. So his hand twitching must mean that I'm telling the truth. I continued. He knocked the bully to the ground and said, Hero Society is cruel. You may be young, but the only way for your corruption to end is through being called like the rest of those corrupt people who call themselves heroes. Sounds about right, Eraser muttered from the corner. Then I stepped forwards and asked him to stop. I explained to the heroes, my voice wavering less as I grew accustomed to the area. I told him he could kill me instead, if he was just on the hunt for death. I missed the way Eraser jerked in the corner as 𝗧𝗵𝗲's hand twitched, the way anger flamed in his gaze for a moment before cooling, his fists clenched at his sides. He then told me, "There are many false heroes that must be culled, but I think you're worth keeping around. Fine, I'll spare him now, but next time I won't be as merciful." Then he cut off the bully's finger and disappeared. When I looked up from my hands, I realized Eraser looked angry. The recording device was off and I murmured an apology, gaze flickering back down again. Even as I wasn't looking at 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I was muttering up a storm. His quirk is so useful. His right hand seems to twitch every time I tell the truth, although that might be for Eraserhead's benefit. I wonder if he can tell if someone is telling the truth through a video or phone if he could. That might help when there's a hostage situation or if there was a kidnapping for ransom. He would be able to tell if someone was telling the truth of letting the person go or not. He could also watch old interrogations and see the truth in those as well. If he couldn't, that's a bummer. I wonder if he could learn to inflict his quirk on others, although that isn't likely. Making someone tell the truth is a lot different than someone telling you of their own accord. I wonder what his parents' quirks are. Does he have any siblings? Their quirks working side by side with his would be amazing to see. If all of them had truth-based quirks, they could be a pretty amazing team in interrogations. Then again, he might not have siblings. Does his quirk work on sarcasm? Will it malfunction if someone thinks they're telling the truth but it's actually a lie? Can he pick up on half-truths? Does he get a gut feeling that someone is lying? Or is there a voice of some kind telling him? He would be amazing in missions being a spy as well. He'll be able to confirm or deny any information he gets from the enemy, as well as when they fully trust him. I glanced up, my face heating as I heard 𝗧𝗵𝗲 clearing his throat. "Don't you have school?" he asked me, his hands loosely steepled on the table in front of him. "I had started 15 minutes ago," I admitted sheepishly, after glancing at the clock on the wall, then looking down at my hands yet again. I was really bad with eye contact. I am royally screwed. Goodbye food, I thought, holding back a tired sigh. "I'll make sure they don't tell your guardian you were late for school," Eraserhead spoke up, making eye contact as my gaze snapped to meet his. His eyes were black, and I just now realized that they would turn red when he activated his quirk. Why would he go out of his way to do that? And nobody, he knows I'm quirkless. I was confused, mouth pulling into a small frown as I marveled over the pro. Does he just think I'm the same as everybody else? No, that can't be right. I'm stupid, weak, useless. I'm not the same. So why does he act so nice? His gaze traveled over my face, inspecting my expression. He sighed and pushed off the wall, motioning with his hand. "Come on, you need to get to class," he ordered. And I was quick to scramble to my feet and follow him as he left the station. As we walked down the streets, I found myself being led by him, although I don't know how he would know where my school was. We walked forwards towards the bland building, passing between the space that opened in the brick wall that surrounded the place, and I was being steered towards the principal's office. Some students sneered at me, others not bothering to take a second glance when they realized an adult was leading me. I doubted anyone knew the hero behind me was a pro. They probably thought he was my dad. My gaze flickered around, paranoid. As we passed by my classroom, I saw a group of kids notice me and grin devilishly. My mood plummeted, my heart sank. That wouldn't be good. When we got to the office, Eraser just completely ignored the secretary and marched into the principal's office, geared up for war. His gaze wasn't determined. Instead, it seemed annoyed and tired. Does he not want to do this? Stupid Deku. Always ruining everything for everyone. I shrunk in on myself, unaware that the look on his face was just a facade, that he wasn't truly annoyed or upset. Tears pricked in my eyes, and I furiously wiped them away, not willing to burst out crying in front of my favorite hero or my principal. I stood silently in the corner as Eraser loomed over the principal, who was clacking away on his ancient computer. As if sensing the imminent threat, the man looked up and quickly paled. He cleared his throat and muffled the instinct that told him to shy away. That was the smart side of him, instead straightening his back and steepling his fingers on his desk. He was doing a better job at looking composed than I had earlier, I would admit. "I don't recall you making an appointment," Aho Suzuki, if the name on his desk was anything to go by, stated with only a slight tremor in his tone. "I didn't," Eraser replied, his voice almost agitated. I swallowed, still on the verge of tears. I didn't even know why he was putting up with this for me. "Well, then I won't be able to speak with Suzuki," started. "Listen here," Eraser began, his voice quiet, annoyed. "I've already had to put up with this for long enough. I don't want any more fuss. You will not count Izuku Midori Atari, and you will not tell his mother about this. Do you understand?" "That's simply not possible," the principal tried, but Eraserhead cut him off again. "It is possible, and it will be done." Eraserhead was glaring, his eyes red and his hair floating. Suzuki shrank back in his chair, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down nervously. "Who even are you to demand this of me?" he asked, eyes wide, fists clenched but trembling. The room seemed to grow darker. and the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. Anger paralyzed everyone but the hunter in the room, froze us in our tracks as the man spoke, his tone deadly. Eraserhead, underground pro hero. Now, let me ask again, as you didn't give me a clear answer. Do you understand? The last part was an angry hiss, and even I was trembling now. However, it wasn't out of fear. I caused this. I caused him to be so upset. It's my fault. I always mess up everything. Always ruin everything. No wonder I'm quirkless and everyone hates me. What have I ever done to deserve a chance? What have you ever done to not deserve a chance, Izuku? I clenched my hands in the fabric of my hoodie, a plain green one. I understand, the principal stuttered, obviously realizing he wasn't the predator in this situation. He was the prey, and he was certainly acting like it. And get him a new uniform, as well, Eraserhead ordered, glancing over at me, my face red. A flash of concern broke through as he saw I was near tears. But he kept her the facade as he waited silently for the principal to frantically grab the phone and say, "Yes, I need a uniform delivered to my office." "What size?" Eraser murmured to me, glancing over again. "Adult small," I replied, crossing my arms around my middle, anxiously chewing the inside of my cheek. "Adult small," Eraserhead barked at the man, who added, voice trembling, "Adult small, please." "No, you don't need to know why I need this uniform. Just get to it." Suzuki offered a small, scared smile, his hands gripped tightly together. Not that it lessened the way he was shaking, the cold sweat that had broke across his brow. "See, coming right you up." Eraser nodded contently, the atmosphere not settling until a uniform was handed to me, crisp and fresh. Eraserhead then followed me to the bathroom, keeping watch by the door until I was finished. Old outfit nestled carefully in my bag. He nodded at me before slipping away, and I walked to class as if nothing had happened. I went to sit down amongst muttered insults and outright jabs. I dodged the leg that poked out to trip me, and then another, until I promptly toppled over one I hadn't seen. The entire class burst into laughter while my English teacher gave me a look and said, "Izuku Midoriya, first you're late. Now you're disrupting class. I'm afraid someone else is sitting in and already took your seat. You'll have to sit at the back." I nodded, ignoring the jeers and insults, then turned around and slid down the wall until I was in a sitting position. I was used to the way the class would be loud and loud and loud, used to the way they would send me glares or mutter death threats. It was just a simple part of life at this point, and I didn't really mind it. It bothered me more than I cared to admit. I listened to the lesson, not taking notes as I watched the chalk slide over the board, the teacher instructing the class. I was already fluent in English, as I had learned when I was younger. It was ingrained into me, as I knew 𝐒𝐻 blamed me for her husband leaving, and it was my fault. So I foolishly spent a few years learning it. It was the only thing I did in my spare time besides analysis. After I was fluent and able to speak the language easily, I had showed Mom, hoping we might be able to see Dad again. My efforts were met with screaming and tears, anger and sadness. I was told to stay out of it. I had always heard that once you stopped speaking a language, it would become lost to you. But English never left. I used to lay in bed at night, the foreign words circling through my head, creating a mantra in my brain. The words and the memories and the time I put into it kept me up at night, allowed me to realize that no matter what I did, I would always be rejected, rebuked, even after years of hard work, years of study. So English never left. Instead it stayed, tormenting me. A captor with an unwilling victim struggling in its cage. An unwelcome friend that added to the chaos in my mind, to the voices that degraded me whenever they had the chance to appear. I let my head rest on the top of my backpack where it lay clutched in my grip. I listened half-heartedly to the lesson, understanding that we were going over how to order more advanced stuff in a restaurant. Breathe in, breathe out. Ignore the urge to correct the teacher when they misspell a word. Black tea, the board read. It would be spelled with an A instead of an E. A rookie mistake, really. Black tea meant a black t-shirt, while black tea was talking about the drink. The man didn't call on me, as he had been humiliated the first time he asked me to correct the sentence on the board. I pointed out 5 misspellings and 3 wrong uses of grammar. Needless to say, he didn't want the quirkless kid looking good at anything, which was fine with me. The day passed slowly, the clock on the wall barely seeming to move as I stared at it. I kept myself from yawning, even as my eyes drooped, even as I nodded off. And then the bell was ringing, startling me from the haze I had been in and allowing me to jump to my feet, attempt to make a quick escape. I barely made it out of the gates of school before they were on me, the taunts, insults, a flash of hurt. It all passed in a blur, exhaustion and pain combining to create a fog that settled over my mind, that allowed me to float despite the agony I was in. I heard multiple crunches, felt some stabs, but then there was one last kick and they were gone. My body was on fire, aching and burning and throbbing beneath the skin, my fingers broken, an arm, both legs, my nose better stop that from bleeding, my foot, my wrist. I wouldn't survive if I stayed here like this. I started moving, tears dripping down my face as I dragged myself along the concrete to the free clinic. Minutes dragged by like hours, red hot flowing through my veins as I went. People weren't out on the streets, and those who were ignored me, glancing over and muttering, "A hero will be here soon." And soon I found myself there, the dirty walls or the alleyway lighting a spark within me as I barely managed to drag myself further. My limbs shook from exertion and pain as I collapsed, my arms giving out and dumping me on the ground with another aching throb. The grimy door awaited me, bringing hope. I tried to move. I failed. A second later, the same door opened to reveal a kid with bandages wrapped around his arm, his expression pleasant. The minute he saw me, he tensed and looked back, shouting, "Someone call Hira." Soon many pairs of arms were lifting me, carrying me into the free clinic and gently resting me on a bed. There wasn't a bed there last time. I didn't realize that 5 minutes passed as I fought to keep my eyes open, knowing what happened when people fell asleep. Soon a door slammed open, a panicked feminine voice calling, "Where is he?" There was unbearable warmth a minute later, white and hot as it felt as though my already broken bones were melting, mending. I was pulled into blackness, surrendering to pain and the promised peace of sleep. I awoke slowly, some bones feeling amazing while the rest of my body was in agony. Hands held my broken leg straight, probably so it would heal right, as power flowed like liquid lava. The power seemed to melt the bone and form it back again, fresh and new, the heat subsiding to comfortable warmth as I understood this ability to be that of the white-haired healer. My eyes wouldn't open no matter how hard I tried, and a female voice muttered, "I'm going to puke." Here, another person called, and footsteps made their way across the room. "My quirk is that I can replenish your energy with my own, but only a little bit. I assume you'll only be able to wake him up and heal the rest of his fingers. His nose is broken, but doesn't necessarily need to be fixed. Just order him to come back tomorrow," the voice explained, giving a recommendation. "He's the type that'll feel really bad about that," the healer replied, a frown evident in her tone. There was a rustling, and then a new voice said, "I don't care if he feels bad about it. This kid came in almost dead, with internal bleeding and a punctured lung. Almost all of his bones were broken. We had to use the emergency contact. And you just barely managed to save him before he drowned because blood was filling his lungs." It didn't feel that bad, but I guess my pain tolerance was really good. The new voice continued, "He needs to come back in tomorrow for a checkup anyways, Hira, so let's fix his fingers and wake him up." "Fine," the healer replied. I was grateful, but confused and embarrassed. Why did they care? Nothing that had happened in the last 2 days made sense. First with me defeating the sludge villain and All Might losing. Well, he didn't really lose. But he didn't win, either. That sight was probably just some up-and-coming AI, so he probably didn't actually not defeat that villain. He probably wasn't even there that day. Yeah, that's why that happened. Still in denial, and Eraserhead was just doing his duty. He must have thought being nice was something he was required to do since he was an underground and maybe didn't know what the daylight heroes were accustomed to doing to the Quirkless. And he didn't want me posting on anything and saying that he was rude or mean, even if no one would have cared. Stain probably saw me walking with pencils and blood and assumed I would be someone good that he could manipulate. Everything had an explanation that made sense, but why did it feel so wrong? One by one my fingers were fixed, felt brand new, and then, all at once, power surged through my brain, and my eyes snapped open as I muffled a pain shout. That hurt. It was worse than broken limbs, worse than explosions that shattered bones and created large wounds that constantly rubbed against my uniform. It felt like a branding iron had been pressed right into my brain. An understanding rushed through me the instant I looked over at the healer. Hira, if I had heard correctly. She had used the last remains of her power to wake me up, but then lost hold of it and let it all surge into my brain. She crumpled to the ground, her mouth open in a small O as she went down. "I'm so sorry," I said immediately, my eyes widening as I ignored the pain in my nose and helped lift Hira onto the bed. "She'll wake up in a minute," someone informed me, and with a glance I saw the person I saved earlier was there, the one with a spiky tail. They grinned when they saw the recognition flicker in my eyes, then introduced themselves. "I'm Tatsu. Pronouns are they, them. Izuku Midoriya," I managed, reaching up and taking my now swelling nose in my hand and deftly pushing it with a crunch, making it look more straight. I ignored the horrified looks the two people in the room gave me, ignored the slight stab of pain. "Anyways, you need to get home," Tatsu told me, ushering me out the door. "Make sure to come back for a checkup tomorrow. Hira's working tomorrow just for you, so it'll be bad if you don't show." Guilt washed over me in a wave, and I slumped slightly. "There really isn't a need for me to come back tomorrow," I started, just to be immediately cut off. "She wants to fucking help, so let her. She will be here tomorrow, and you will appear. You understand?" A guy spoke up from the corner, having moved there after he helped us lift Hira onto the bed. His golden eyes glinted dangerously in the light as he ordered, "Now leave. Hira needs rest, and you aren't helping." Nodding and quickly leaving the back area, I was out in the alleyway again. His reaction made sense. I was quirkless, useless, and someone who was probably his friend that had an amazing quirk had just passed out helping me. There was no reason for her to do that. Letting me die would have been easier. The sky was pretty tonight, I noticed. Shit. It was dark out, which meant Mom would be mad. A broken nose would be all the evidence she needed to assume I got into trouble, tried to do a drug deal, or something along those lines. My eyes watered. These past few days had left me emotionally and physically exhausted. But I realized something. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had used the last reserves of her power in her attempt to wake me up. It had been very painful. That meant that using her quirk in large amounts brings pain, in the form of heat, especially when there's nothing wrong with that section of the body. I took out my notebook as I walked, scribbling down notes of 𝗧𝗵𝗲's quirk as I went. That quirk was amazing, and it had so much potential, both in healing and heroics. Imagine being able to win with just a skim of your hand. I wondered if she even needed physical contact. Last I checked, she used her hands to set bones. But had she been touching me when she passed out? I don't think so. If she can use her quirk like that, she probably just needs to get in range. The possibilities of that quirk are insane. She could stop any villain fight in a matter of seconds. A wild grin took over my face, but it slowly melted into a frown. So why wasn't she a hero? She might be in UA. I don't have any information on her personal or school life. And that last burst of power was when her reserves were almost completely gone. Imagine what it would be like when she was completely energized, renewed, fresh. The level of pain that could cause would be immense. I found myself wondering if her quirk was just healing, or if it involved her using heat to actually melt stuff within the body and form it back together again. That was a long shot, but it could work. Or maybe it just felt like that. And in reality she was a healer, but her power was really hot. I glanced around, then sped up, practically sprinting to get home. The door creaked open, and there was a ping on a phone from 𝐒𝐭𝐲's room. I cringed internally, already preparing myself for shouting. What I wasn't prepared for, however, was for her to practically storm down the stairs, her hands clenched tightly into fists at her sides. I wasn't prepared for her to start screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was fragile. Resentment flashed through me for a second, contorting my face as I listened. 𝗧𝗑, you're too fragile. You can't just do this, leave, and not tell me where you are. Your tracking was turned off. What if you got killed? Is your nose broken? The next part was a complete shock, however, as she got even louder. Do you realize how bad it would look if my son died during a drug deal? You've ruined my life. Everything I do is for you. I had a loving husband. I had everything I ever wanted. Her fist was pulling back, prepared to punch, hit, scream some more. But she trembled, tears in her eyes as she screeched, "Don't expect me to care for you anymore, you ungrateful brat. Go to your room and stay there. I won't be providing food or water for you anymore. You don't deserve a right to education. You stay in your room and don't leave until I tell you can. That includes school time." She stormed off, into the kitchen, and I was moving, sniffling and retreating to my room, my safe place, my prison. My nose ached, I had a migraine, and the rest of my body felt amazing. That rant had been very detailed in the school part, something I was surprised she would even address considering she was so mad she wanted to punch me. I mean, I would have thought she wouldn't say anything about that so she had an excuse to hurt me in the morning. At least someone isn't being confusing anymore, I dimly recognized, pressing my palms into my eyelids, trying to stop the crying. I just ended up locking my room door and curling up on my bed, messaging freebies and managing a watery smile when someone replied to me immediately and started comforting me. Heroes, civilians, even some villains hating me was commonplace, but I always knew where I could turn to if I needed it. I always knew I had freebies and the entire Quirkless community on my side. Curling up on my side, exhaustion and a barely flickering feeling of happiness helping lull me to sleep. Why was I happy after all of this? How could I be even a little bit happy? I took it all back. I woke up the next morning staring at the all-night alarm clock and noticing I had moved. My hand delicately felt my nose, and I realized why it was aching so much. I had rolled over in my sleep and heard it again. I wondered why I had woken up, thinking it was either because I had gotten rest or because my nose burned. Then, I heard the front door open and close and checked my phone. Sure enough, it was 12. The time Mom went to work for an hour. That meant that I could leave and go to the free clinic. Wincing at the thought of going back after what 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had done for me already, how she had passed out, I knew she didn't want to see me. She might have stood up for me in school, but that was probably before she found out I was quirkless, worthless. Come on, Deku, you need to go. She's going to be there today and she won't treat you again if you don't show. What if you need it again? That was a new voice. What if I need the treatment again and she refuses because she was there specifically for me and I didn't go? My mind whispered, pushing me to move. And I knew I needed to leave so I could get back before 𝐒𝐭𝐲 did. I sighed, pulling on my Eraserhead hoodie and deciding I needed more Eraserhead and present mic merch filling my walls and shelves, replacing All Might. And maybe I could make my own poster of Detective 𝗧𝗵𝗲. That could be cool. And maybe both 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and Eraser can be on a poster in the interrogation room. I could recreate the scene, but from my perspective and only see those two. My pencil scratching lightly over some paper, marking down the idea in a notebook. Wrangling my curls up into a ponytail was no easy feat, but I managed. Flipping up my hood, I left the apartment and walked towards the free clinic, deciding it needed a better name. Well, it's kind of been my saving grace. So maybe I could call it the Miracle Zone. Stupid name, shitty Deku. I smiled. Bad name for a quirkless nobody. A Deku, one I definitely deserved. Everything felt almost right with the world. My mother was finally revealing her true roots. The heroes had excuses for being nice or losing, and I wasn't that exhausted anymore. I also had new ideas and was excited for hero merch, even if it wasn't All Might's. Everything felt more normal, felt like it was how it should be. This shouldn't be your normal, Izu. I breathed in, out. I walked. I ignored the nagging feeling of paranoia and decided, tomorrow will be a new day where everything will finally make sense. Hopefully. I was walking back from the Miracle Zone when it happened. My spirits were lifted. Tomorrow would be a new, unconfusing day, and then I picked up on a noise from an alleyway. In broad daylight, I wondered, taking a deep breath and peeking into the alleyway, scarily similar to what happened yesterday, a few days ago. How long had it been? Anxiously chewing on my lip, my hands moved to call in the crime, an instinct. A popular vigilante was holding a gun to someone's head, their posture agitated, angry. I wanted to step in, I really did, but a hero was on the way, and I didn't want to make this any worse for the person in the situation. My eyes roved over the alleyway, taking in every small detail, taking special interest in the vigilante. His quirk was something along the lines of flames, and it wasn't hard to notice small sparks flying off of the handle of the gun. Bingo. Red flames, so most likely a weak fire quirk, primarily situated in his hands. It isn't looking very good for the other man. If the villain melts the trigger and handle of the gun, which he probably can't, his fire wouldn't be hot enough. I don't think what would happen with the gun. Would it fire? With that thought, I shut my muttering down, the realness of the situation hitting me. Last time I had been on a roof in the dead of night. Last time I had been exhausted but excited at the fact of rebellion. Last time it had been a school bully. Last time there was no weapon. Last time I knew I could rely on an underground hero, or a wanted villain. This time, though, I had to rely on a limelight hero, on a daylight hero. No, Deku, stop. The heroes can handle this. Any hero is a hero, not just an underground. I was useless, utterly helpless as I watched the scene play out. Dread pooled in my gut as the seconds ticked down to the breaking point, down to a finger tightening on a trigger. For an instant, the whole world was quiet. A loud bang echoed out, red splattering the wall. Bullet hole exposing brain, and fuck, I was gonna puke. The world blurred. I was running, and there was an open alleyway, and I was throwing up in a corner, and curled into a ball, and red. My mind was back to the scene, playing over and over, the world dropping out from around me. I watched the instant their grip tightened, the bullet hole, the red splatter, the chunks of brain that leaked from the wound that shouldn't exist, that was all over the wall. My breaths came in sharp gasps, and I was trembling and dry heaving and dehydrated, and I needed an anchor. But there was none to be found. There was no soothing hand rubbing circles in my back, no steady presence to instruct me on how to breathe again. I was alone. This was how it would always be. This was how it should be. But now the world was wrong. The world was stained with red, blood everywhere. Blood on the hands of the heroes, splattered over villains, over bystanders who did nothing but watch. Over me, I was drowning, nothing to pull me back up to the surface. Time had no meaning as I sat there, struggling to breathe. All that existed was sinking, floating, all at the same time. Reality was gone, the only thing left being red and that awful gunshot. And heroes and villains and civilians tainted by red. A scratchy voice was laughing, was inviting me to join them. A familiar villain was calling me a hero. I was stabbing someone in the eyes with pencils. A fist was raised, prepared to hit, but not following through. A taunting voice urged me to take a swan dive. There was a hero, giving me a nod. The voices, the shows, the scenes dropped away, leaving nothing. I floated, not in touch with my surroundings, with anything. I wasn't me anymore. There was no Deku, no Kaken. There were no heroes, no quirks, just nothing. I floated, and I floated, until slowly I started being pulled back down to earth, the alleyway, to a fuzzy warm bundle of fluff curling around my neck. Purrs shook my body. Light breaths allowed my own to fall in rhythm. My shaky hand reached back and was met with soft fur, a black tail flicking me in the face as sharp claws pricked at my skin through clothing. A cat clambering down into my lap and turning to face me, emerald eyes shining. A watery smile appeared on my face, a far cry from the way I used to shine like a sun. But here I was in an alleyway, coming off of a panic attack because of a cat. A small laugh slipped through my lips, and I let my hand sink into silky onyx-colored fur. Closing my eyes, I took a deep breath. A limelight hero strolled by the alleyway, laughing with a fan. They were heading in the direction of the crime scene. To say I was upset would be off. My blood boiled as I stared at the hero walking by, vicious and unrelenting anger and upset and frustration and loathing wrapping around my heart, clawing in and making a home that burned. They had let someone die because of their stupidity. I blinked, curling in on myself, cat purring all the while as I realized I had let someone die. I didn't step in when I could have, didn't step in when I should have. The putrid emotions that tried to strangle me, the flame that bloomed being blown to almost ashes, only small sparks still remaining. Tears silently rolled down my cheeks as I sat there in the alleyway. I let them fall, not only for my helplessness, not only for the dead man laying in an alleyway right now, but because this was a buildup of everything that had happened, where everything was pushing at the back of my eyes, where I was sniffling, my face wet, because I wasn't only 13 right now. I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I was me, Deku, after the diagnosis. I was living through everything the world threw at me, every foul remark and spider lily over again. I buried my face in black fur, not noticing the way its head turned, green eyes watching me, understanding. I cried, I sobbed, I stayed there for what felt like hours, emotions rolling through me. And then I forced myself to stand, to put the cat down, to whisper for it to go find someone else who needs help. Slowly walking home, drained, the hood of my Eraserhead sweatshirt rustled slightly as I flicked it up and started to run, desperate to get back before 𝐻𝐻𝗄 did. Pushing down the tears and sobs that threatened to crawl up my throat was probably too easy, but concerningly familiar. To an outside perspective, at least, I sprinted hard, fast. Imagined Kakin and fingers on my tail. I imagined everything gone. Imagined I was sprinting through a forest, a kingdom, a palace. I was anywhere but this place that brought pain and suffering. The freedom was breathtaking, for an instant. I opened a door in the castle I ran through. I was home, in my room, and the lock on my door was clicking, and I was collapsing onto the bed with a tired sigh, images of fantasy I had built around me crumbling down. My optimistic energy from before had been replaced with exhaustion. Even if I had just woken up, I would always be tired physically, would always long for rest that would never come. But I was now also tired emotionally, curling into a ball yet again, thankful I had pulled the thick curtains that covered my windows. What if someone wants to take you, 𝐬𝐻𝗄? Not only the bars will work. These will block out light and the creeps. Closed. That the room was dark except for the light that shone through the bottom crack. A few minutes later the front door opened, keys jingling on the rack before another door. Mom's bedroom door opened and closed. Laying boneless in the bed would only do so much. However, my body refused to let me sleep. And instead I just laid there with my eyes closed, longing for darkness, for dreams, for something other than this. The feelings from earlier rose to the surface, anger and resentment pushing me to my feet, along with determination. Daylight heroes hadn't done anything. I would do something. I had to do something. I wasn't an idiot. I knew I was worthless and weak. I knew I needed training and skills. So, the most logical answer was to go online. I pointedly ignored the merch graveyard in the closet and pulled all of my snacks onto my bed, spreading the week's worth of snack food and separating them into sections. Humming softly, I grabbed water bottles, my laptop, a charger, and headphones. This was an amazing setup if I did say so myself. You don't deserve anything nice, you unevolved freak. I swallowed, forcibly shoving the voice down and deciding to get to work. Going to school anytime soon was out of the equation. And I knew the principal wouldn't have any qualms with that, forcing me to finish my education online. Realistically, I knew I didn't need to spend 3 hours searching for the best online school that gave courses in coding and analysis and quirk theory, but it gave me something to do, so I wasn't complaining. Besides, I managed to find a really good one, too. I never would have seen it if I hadn't done my research. This was also one of the only online schools that didn't care if you were quirkless, so there's that. I would be able to move at my own pace as long as I finished all of my assignments before they were due. This also means that when I was lying awake at 3 a.m., motivated to do something for once, I could just get online and do schoolwork. After enrolling myself, I continued to search for resources to learn how to hack. Most of the things I found were just courses in cybersecurity, which would probably work, but I wanted to outright learn as I went along, see where it could be applied when hacking actual government technology. After searching through various less-than-legal sites, I came across something on an underground forum. Someone was willing to teach others how to hack, all for free. It seemed too good to be true, but after replying to the thread, the alleged hacker told me that they just wanted to train newbies to cause some chaos and maybe even make a new villain or vigilante. A grin slowly tipped the corners of my mouth up, teeth flashing for a moment as I replied. Sounds like it aligns with my goals perfectly. Well then, Trace, what you say we set up a lesson? Early in the morning, late at night. What times are you free? Preferably from 11:03 a.m. You good WTH that? Works for me. Can we start tomorrow? Sure, what time? And how? 12. Here, call me Skipper BTW. pronouns he, him. I hesitated, staring at the foreign link. Clicking on the link might download a virus to my computer, might be very dangerous. There was no way to find out if this was a Trojan horse or not. Taking risks and being stupid was in my nature, however. Snatching some electrical tape from my bedside table. No, you cannot judge. I use it for projects where I need black tape. I quickly put it over the camera and downloaded a proxy. Would it realistically stop an experienced hacker? No, but it made me feel better at least as I took the risk and clicked on the link hesitantly. It brought me to a site, one that seemed to be perfect for what we would be doing. I clicked on the sign in button, creating an account, using the name TR4C3 and getting a mentor request from 𝗂𝗵𝗲. After accepting, a voice crackled to life from my computer. My eyes widened as the person the voice was mechanical, likely a built-in voice changer spoke, saying, "Trace, buddy, it's gonna be nice to train you. You can reply in the small chat box icon that appears in the bottom right of your screen. See you tomorrow." The voice was gone a second later, static appearing. I clicked the chat box icon like instructed and saw the hang up button. After leaving the call, I exited the site, making sure to bookmark it. A relieved breath whooshed past my lips, a laugh escaping my throat. I did it. I was on the right track to becoming a vigilante. And someone had talked to me without being condescending or spiteful. Sure, people had done that before, like Detective 𝗧𝗵𝗲 and 𝗬𝗧𝗔, but it was still really rare. And sure, Skipper doesn't know I'm quirkless, but that doesn't make it any less refreshing. And I was pretty sure that 𝗬𝗧𝗔 being nice had an ulterior motive, but oh well. I shook my head, feeling the need to get back on track. Next was the support items. The online school I had picked out did have some support classes, in which I was enrolled in, but it didn't hurt to do some research. That was how I spent 5 hours researching technology. I only stopped because the low power tab flashed. After exiting it, I plugged in the laptop and checked the time. 5 hours was a lot, but certainly less than the times I had practically stalked heroes trying to find more information on them to analyze. The bag of chips crackled as it opened, my hand reaching in and grabbing some of the delicious snack. Relaxing back into my pillows, yawning, and setting aside my laptop, I continued to snack, not yet feeling the tug of sleep. So next on the list is finding out how to leave my room, get supplies for support items, and grab more food. Have to try and find some more hero merch while I'm at it. Was the hero merch something that was actually on my mind? Yes it was. Hero merch. It helps me remember what I'm doing this for. Helps me remember what I strive to achieve. I feel comforted, protected, around my favorite heroes, whether that be in spirit or in person. Maybe that was why 𝗬𝗧𝗔 was so good at helping me calm down. Maybe that's why I always gave excuses for All Might to do no wrong. Without heroes, I had nothing. No ground to stand on. No motivation. Without them I was nothing, would always be nothing. At least with my heroes I could be supportive, even without my opinion mattering. And now I was trying to make a difference, trying to learn. I was trying to do better than some of the heroes I'd seen. Strive towards a goal for once instead of just scraping by. The corners of my lips tilted downwards. What was making me think that I could even do this in the first place? What if I couldn't hack, couldn't make support gear? What if I was worse than those heroes themselves? Doubt started to settle in. I hadn't really thought about this while I was researching, trying to learn, planning. In the end, a Deku would always be a Deku, right? Putting down my bag of chips, I rolled over and snatched my laptop from where it rested on my bedside table. Barely paying attention, I searched up, "Is being a hacker simple?" Immediately reading the first pop-up had me grinning. The only words I registered were "being a hacker is simple." Of course, as the tab was exited and my laptop closed, I never realized the words right after it. But very challenging, especially without a quirk related to technology or code. So if hacking is simple and easy, then I should be able to get it no problem. I might struggle a bit with learning everything, but other than that I'm set. And I know a lot of people who are quirkless and want to go into heroics or support gear makers. Well, they are really smart, but I'm sure I can learn it too. And if I can't, that's fine. I'll just message the heroes instead of trying to actually talk to them. A relieved smile was now stretching across my face. Knowing that I could do something for once was something to be excited about. If everything was easy and simple, then I wouldn't have to worry about not being able to get it. And I couldn't put down my online school or Skipper. I'm sure they would be excellent teachers. I couldn't discount their teaching abilities. Maybe online people are really good teachers, and even a Deku can learn from them. That kinda makes sense, right? Skipper didn't even know I was quirkless, though, so he might not know that I'm a really bad learner. I would tell him. But him knowing my identity would be scary, definitely not something an online hacker should know about me. Then again, he could probably find me in seconds if he tried, but I would just have to trust that he wouldn't do that. It was only 11 o'clock, but my eyes were drooping as I tried to sleep. Closing my eyes didn't seem to work, and I was left to just toss and turn in bed. Normally I would stay awake until around 5 in the morning, so I wasn't under the illusion I would be falling asleep anytime soon. My tongue ran over my teeth as I wondered when going to the bathroom would be possible. Maybe 𝗂𝗵𝗲, the time when Mom went to work, was the only opportunity I would get. Does she ever visit her friends? Does she have friends? Mrs. Bakugo would be one of them, although I didn't know if she knew anyone else. Mom's life had always been a mystery to me, something I didn't even try to crack after that incident with me learning English. On the topic of languages, maybe learning a new one would be fun. French, that was popular. Russian, a different alphabet would be a challenge. And it would be hilarious to see how others would react to me using a Russian accent and all of a sudden speaking a new language. Then I would be trilingual and could converse with more strangers who still didn't know I was quirkless. Sure, there would likely not be a time where Russian would need to be used in the real world, but I could definitely meet some new people online. Who knew? Maybe there were other quirkless people I might be able to connect with when learning a different language. I still communicated with people from America, no matter how much it stung to think back on how hard I had worked. All for nothing. Not nothing, I reminded myself, taking a deep breath. Communicating with new people who need help is always worth it, always worth something. As long as I continued to remember that, looking back on those memories wouldn't only be bitter. They wouldn't only be a place of hurt, something I had failed in again. It would be bittersweet, but it was better than having nothing good to look back on when I revisited them. Russian it is, then. This would be a good way to remember that learning languages could be fun instead of hurtful. After spending another 2 hours, I really did need to stop overthinking things and spending too long researching for no reason. I found a site that would teach me all of the letters and how to pronounce everything before I moved on to learning the actual language. Yawning, I put my headphones on and played music, the reading for hours allowing me to fall asleep quickly for once. Well, technically I had tried going to sleep a few hours beforehand, but that could be ignored in favor of the dark that rushed up to drag my tired mind under. Sleep debt was definitely something I would blame if I ended up sleeping past 11. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, have you seen Loki? As Ashi called across the apartment, his voice holding a concerned lilt to it. I groaned softly, not in the mood to deal with this today. Having to wake up early to go to UA had never been fun. But apparently Nedzu decided it would be a good idea to host staff meetings every other week. There was no reason for me to be there, considering I had expelled my entire class on the first day, but the little rat had insisted on my presence. No, I haven't. He's probably off getting into trouble, I replied, pulling on my black boots. It was no secret that the kitten we had taken off the streets 5 years ago wasn't an ordinary cat. Well, not to us it wasn't. I could tell the instant I picked it up that there was something more intelligent found in those green eyes. And having an added empathy quirk was interesting, to say the least. He couldn't talk like Nedzu could, and wasn't quite as smart, but he still managed to find anyone on the streets who needed comforting. I couldn't count the number of times he would wind around my legs in the middle of patrol to convince me to run after him and find a kid having a panic attack. Knowing Loki, he was probably off comforting another person, and would be back by 5. A small grin spread across my lips, and I buried my face in the capture scarf that seemed to always rest around my neck. Anyone could be a hero if they set their mind to it, it seemed, even cats. I strolled peacefully along the streets, easily dodging through the small groups that always crowded the narrow space. A bright grin easily adorned my face, relief that I could get out for a while. It had only been a month, but Mother had finally decided that she was going to see a friend. Her and Auntie Mitsuki quietly whispering about how long they would be at the mall in the dead of night had not gone unnoticed by me. I needed fabric paint for my shoes, and hopefully I could find some hero merch as well. My fingers itched to bury into a soft hoodie, something dark that would allow me to blend in, but also designed after a hero. I already had my eraser head one, but it was too precious to risk getting ruined because someone saw my shoes. Underground hero merch was always hard to find, but I had been working and expanding my collection. Of course, the only merch I was able to find out on the street was a Snipe keychain, and then Ms. Joke socks, but it was to be expected. Getting online would probably help, and with Skipper's lessons I should be able to stop 𝐿 from seeing the charge on her card. Speaking of Skipper, at first I had seen him as someone who wasn't to be trusted, an illegal hacker I was getting lessons from so I could do my best to help people. Over the course of the past month, trust had slowly started to bud, and I could say we were friends. Making sure to keep the fact I was quirkless secret was a bit hard, but I managed. After all, I didn't want to lose the first friend I'd had in years. Maybe that proved that I was useless, unnatural, stupid, but I would be willing to do anything to hold on to him just a little bit tighter. We would talk and he would teach every night. There was never a demand for pay, to know the other's identity. It was nice. The sun glinted off of the waves, and my gaze immediately flashed over, squinting. That wasn't the waves. That was metal, reflecting light, a whole sheet of it. It would be so handy with the support gear I had been working on so far. My course righted immediately, and I glanced down at the watch that rested around my wrist, the small digital numbers staring back at me. 12:32, so I had about 2.5 hours until 3. Good. Enough time to grab anything I needed. Who knew? Maybe that sheet wasn't the only metal that rested on the beach. As I turned a corner onto the supposedly slightly dirty sand, I was met with heaping mounds of garbage. Even better, the front end of a truck rested to the right, trash covering the car completely. There was a smashed alarm clock, the remains of a watch, tin cans, paint, chains, barbed wire, a huge clump of cables. Was that a soldering iron? I was darting across the sand immediately, ignoring how it sprayed up around me. Gripping the small device, I pulled the rest of the cord out, noting with a large grin that it was intact. Why it was here was a mystery. But as my gaze flickered around to the piles of metal scraps and food waste, I realized I had found the place, the supplies I needed to make support items. Sure, they wouldn't all be made of the same material, and sure, they wouldn't be as durable as they would be with steel or actual purchased materials, but it would be something. I could finally see if I was any good at support. It had been challenging at first, of course it is stupid Deku, but I had eventually gotten the hang of it, the blueprint part at least, and getting help from others on freebies had been so fun. They had effectively taken me under their wing, and I had more people I could talk to. Really, sentencing me to my room had been something that allowed me more happiness than I thought I would ever have again. Metal clanked as I darted around, putting good supplies in my bag and finding other backpacks. Some were moldy but others were perfectly intact. Wait, was that armored material? That would be effective to use while carrying stuff. Small metal clamps allowed me to attach multiple bags together, and soon a small section of the beach had significantly less stuff than it had moments prior. Would it look weird for a middle schooler to be carrying all of this? Yes, but did I care? Nope. That was technically a lie. The mutters and suspicious glares never ceased to make my skin crawl. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My feet burrowed deeper into the sand as I trudged across it and onto the asphalt street, a faint clanking noise accompanying my presence. The walk back was filled with stares and whispers, some of them hushed and others openly hostile. I really needed to fix my shoes. Few cared enough to research what shoes the Quirkless could wear, but those who did always kept a lookout for the bright red. Of course, the company decided that the only color they would offer would be bright red and would stick out like a sore thumb. They made billions of dollars in sales, though, seeing as they were the only people who actually sold good quality shoes for the Quirkless. Sighing, I reached up to push hair out of my eyes. The hot sun shone down on me. The humidity also wasn't helping make the job of getting all of the scrap metal and supplies to the apartment that much harder. Thankfully, the heat would be gone in a little under a month once October rolls around. I breathed a sigh of relief once I got home, the door creaking open. Really, I would need to oil the hinges. It could give me away if I had to sneak back in once Mom was home, or if I had to leave. Practically dragging the backpacks full of items up the stairs, I hid the more important ones in fake bottoms of desk drawers. The small objects, gears, and some more scrap metal would go in a box shoved all the way under my bed in a back corner. Humming while I looked at my options, I grabbed a nice gray color and quickly covered my shoes in a layer of paint. Good, that should stop me from getting harassed for being quirkless. Then I was back outside again, my eyes darting around. Natsukami was happening right now, so there were lots of people wandering about in different cosplays of heroes, amongst other things. With a deep breath, I navigated my way through the crowds, ignoring the noise and the pushing and shoving of the way it reminded me of a certain explosive teen. Then, my eyes caught on a small booth hidden in the shadows. Was that no way? My luck today was insane. I became one of the ones shoving, ignoring the way people scowled at me, and soon was in front of the booth that was selling only underground hero merch. Hi, I stuttered to the woman working there. She smiled, flipping light green hair behind her back and saying, "Welcome to the booth. Didn't expect to get any kids over here, but it seems like you have good taste." She gave a wink, her personality bright and bubbly. I recognized her from somewhere. I knew I did. Who was she? My eyes narrowed as I stared at her for a second. "Hey Emmy," 𝐬𝐼 said I should take over the shop for a Who's This Little Listener. A man with blonde hair tied up in a bun appeared inside the booth, and my eyes widened as I realized, "You're a mess, Joke." I bounced on the tips of my toes as I stared at the two. Present Mike and Ms. Joke. Joke looks similar to her hero persona, but that's probably because she's an underground and no one really knows her. Mike is a bit more popular, but he's still less known. I wonder why they're selling underground hero merch, though. And who's 𝐬𝐼? I have to do more research. Maybe what Skipper taught me will come in handy for that. So what merch do I get? I mean, Eraserhead merch is really rare, but they have 𝐬𝐼 merch and Snipe and Mr. Brave and Vlad King and Ms. Joke. 𝐬𝐼 is common amongst the heroes as one of the smartest aside from Netsu, but not a lot of civilians know about him. I already have Snipe, Ms. Joke, Eraserhead, and Present Mike merch, so maybe 𝐤𝐼, Brave, or Vlad. But still, Eraserhead merch is tempting, along with Present Mike. My eyes focused back on Present Mike and Ms. Joke, red immediately spreading across my face. They didn't seem upset, though. Ms. Joke just laughed and said, "Seems you're more of a talker than a listener." 𝗵𝘃𝗀 grinned and said, "Nice to see someone giving the undergrounds the love they deserve. Aside from me, of course." I tilted my head, wondering what he meant by that. Maybe I could buy 2 items. 3. Oh, and by the way, little listener, it's buy 3 get 3 free. Mike was way calmer in his civilian form, his glasses rectangle and resting on the bridge of his nose. 3 it was then. I decided to get 1 eraser head bracelet, 1 present Mike necklace, and Mr. Brave fingerless gloves. I really wanted the shoes, but they were for the quirked. Then I chose an MS joke action figure, a Sir Night-Eye ring, and Vlad King shorts. Hold up, was that a replica of an eraser head capture weapon? I got that too. Long story short, I spent way too much money. It was worth it though, and then I got present Mike and MS joke to sign my notebook, each on different pages so I could make a collection. First eraser head, now present Mike and Ms. Joke. This was amazing. I was in euphoria as I made my way home, ignoring the fact there was still an hour left before 𝐭 got home. The second my room door shut with a small click, I was pulling on my merch. First the gloves, then the necklace. I grabbed my socks, then the bracelet, then a hoodie and the scarf, and the keychain was clipped onto the necklace. Then the ring and some shorts. I was officially drowning in hero merch, but I let out a content sigh and laid down on my bed, afternoon sunlight streaming in from the window. Seems today was a good day. The paint on my shoes was still wet. Fuck, come on, can't handle another one? I teased, bumping my hip with 𝗧𝗪. "A kid is different from a cat, 𝗧𝗪𝗧," 𝗧𝗪𝗪 grumbled, sipping his coffee. "But it would be so fun to have a little listener around," I argued back, sliding in front of my husband with a big grin on my face. I could tell he wouldn't budge today, though, so I just gave a warm smile and placed my hand over his. "Whenever you're ready, show." He muttered under his breath for a moment before shoving a hand in my face and pushing me backwards. "Go man the damn shop. Why the hell did we set up a booth anyways? You're not going to get a lot of customers. It's the vision, show, the vision," I grinned, shaking my head. "But fine, I'll send Emmy back here no." Chuckling softly, I stood and pushed back the chair I was sitting in, expecting to only be listening to the sounds of the crowd. I pulled my hair back into a bun and started, "Hey Emmy, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 said I should take over the shop for a Who's This Little Listener." I cut myself off, a bright grin spreading across my face as I realized that someone was actually going to maybe buy something. And especially this cute one. I couldn't help the feeling of attachment already. If the little guy liked underground heroes, he obviously had good taste. Not that he would recognize me or Emmy or Ms. Joke. I stand corrected, then. Okay, no, I take it back. He wasn't cute, he was adorable. The way his eyes were shining as he started to mutter to himself and bounce on his toes. I wanted to keep him. Of course, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 would say no, and I couldn't just go kidnapping children without a good plan. But the way he froze, red spreading along his face, only dissatisfied me. He was obviously embarrassed, maybe bullying. I scoped him out as Emmy made one of her jokes, and my eyes eventually flickered down to his shoes. They were gray, so not Quirkless then. Oh, that was a stripe of red that seemed to be wiped away. And his shoes were still wet. He was Quirkless. Concern immediately washed over me as I found myself saying, "Nice to see someone giving the undergrounds the love they deserve. Aside from me, of course." I grinned, shoving the fact he was Quirkless to the back of my mind and giving the little listener all the attention he needed. It was a good thing I didn't have his name. The second he was gone, it would hinder my search for him completely unless I got 𝗧𝗪𝗧 roped in. No kidnapping children, no kidnapping children. I mean, 𝗫𝗫 would probably help me find him if I asked. I remembered something of what he had been muttering earlier and added, "Oh, and by the way, little listener, it's buy 3 get 3 free. Emmy shot me a questioning glance, but didn't say anything as she continued to joke with the kid as he got as many different heroes as he could. Right as he was about to leave, though, his eyes caught on the eraser head scarf, and he quickly bought that, too. He seemed to eye the shoes that were set out, each with a different underground hero on them, but I understood he wouldn't be able to buy any, they were all for the quirked. He even got us to sign his notebook, with quite a bit of stuttering. I wondered if that was a speech impediment, or if he was just really nervous. Maybe both. When he was gone, I looked over at Emmy and said, "We need Quirkless shoes." She didn't question it, just grinned and gave a huge thumbs up, making funny jokes here and there for the rest of our time out there. As we started to pack up and go inside, she started making jokes about 𝗧𝗪𝗧 dating her. Sometimes it got on my nerves. He was my husband, but I let her do as she wished. He would turn her down every time. No questions asked. Then, my mind got caught back up on the little listener and I started chattering excitedly with her about him. I know, he was a cutie, right? And his stutter was adorable. Joke replied to a comment I had made. "He's Quirkless. Did you notice his shoes?" I voiced my findings. "So that's why you wanted Quirkless shoes out there." There was a sound of choking coming from 𝗧𝗪𝗧 a minute later. The underground pro coughing as he asked, "Quirkless?" "Yeah, there was a cute little listener who came by today, the only customer. He was adorable, show. He had a bit of a stutter, but got our autographs in his notebook and got a lot of different heroes, too. Seems to be a fan of yours, actually, I gushed. He showed back up again. Sho questioned, a slightly disgruntled look on his face. Was he covering up something? You okay, Sho? You know him? I asked, a small grin creeping over my features. Fine, he replied, sipping on coffee again. You don't look fine, I pressed, my eyes lighting up when I realized what emotion he was hiding. Fondness. Just someone Tsukachi mentioned once. Nothing more, nothing less, shouted deflected. Maybe he was just hiding it around Emmy. But I had a creeping suspicion he knew the kid already. The second Emmy was gone, I was questioning him, annoying him until he huffed and muttered. I helped talk him down from a panic attack once. He was the kid who took down the sludge villain. My mouth dropped as I replied. The little listener has some spunk too. And you're getting attached, aren't you? I was prying at this point, leaning in so our faces were inches apart. No, Shouter replied, his face flat and his arms crossed. Can we keep him? We've been over this before, Zashi. But no kidnapping. My eyes flashed across the screen, pencil in hand as I took notes on the support teacher's lecture. Today we were talking about how to minimize the space essential parts of the machine took up. My research had already helped me learn this, but it was never a bad idea to get a second opinion and more notes on the subject. It was mostly about different items and specific brands that could fit together and be organized way more easily with each other, which was also something to mark down if I ever got enough money in the future to be able to afford it. The teacher already stated he would be going over how to make the main components smaller in general, but that it was difficult to grasp. I'll just do some extra studying if it does come to that, I dismissed. A few months ago I would have been stuttering on how I couldn't learn support if it was challenging, but I'd also seen that, over time, extra studying helps. The constant support and uplifting messages I was receiving from both Skipper and Freebies certainly helped with that, as well. Maybe with Skipper it was more telling me I was an idiot, but in a fond way. It had taken me a while to understand he wasn't just plain insulting me. And I only found out that because he called me an idiot when he was teaching me and I burst into tears. Besides, if I study more than everyone else, then it makes sense I could maybe be on par with them. My work wasn't amazing, but it was enough to get by in the class and as a sort of future vigilante. The teaching was over soon enough. The only thing Sensei told us to do was rest over the weekend. The laptop shut with a quiet click, and my eyes darted over to my now steel gray shoes. It would be a relief to be able to hide my status in public. No one would recognize me if I went into a store, anyways. I shivered slightly just thinking about stores. From what Mom had said, they were crowded, loud, and dangerous. I was fragile anyways. Well, not to the point where I couldn't do anything, but I was weaker than most. I digress. Being in a store alone would be dangerous. So hyping myself up to go to one the second and co-left was a definite challenge. But over time, I started to wonder, would Mom even notice if I left for over a day? If there was a mechanism that could be made to automatically turn the lights on and off for my sleep schedule, I'm sure she would never think to check. Ignoring the feeling that clenched around my heart at the thought, my pencil was already scratching against notebook paper. After a few minutes, my stomach growled, distracting me from the task at hand. A sigh breezed past my lips. I was hesitant to eat any food that I had, though. My food stash was now barren. Only small bags of chips and granola bars left over after a month of sneaking out of the room to grab only one snack. Careful so that she wouldn't notice it was missing. But only one snack a day was taking its toll. After an entire life of being properly fed, even overfed, at some points, almost none a day was hitting me pretty hard. My stomach ached again, and I barely restrained myself from grabbing an alluring snack, or even better, a small biscuit. It would probably be moldy in a few days, but better to save the food for when it was desperately needed. The front door opened and closed, a faint noise that could barely be heard over sounds of traffic. My feet scrambled against the floor for a moment as I practically flew down the stairs to the pantry. A small water bottle an afterthought, the door open and granola bar out, to only quickly disappear from the wrapper and into my mouth. I shifted from foot to foot as the fridge slowly filled up the small metal bottle of water, something I had scavenged from the beach on the first run. At first it was going to be turned back into scrap, but it had its uses. If there was a way to get fire going in my room safely, maybe ramen would be possible one night. The cup o' noodles variety didn't really have an aroma, so there was a chance. The pantry doors were shut and the wrapper stuffed in a pocket as I was back up the stairs again, snatching a few hundred yen and another bag of chips as I went. It was the largest amount of loot I had taken so far, but that was the plan for next time she left. Sadly, I didn't know how long she would be gone, as she had just gotten back from work 2 hours ago, so there was no chance of me going outside and being caught by her. Too risky. Minimize danger, and to do that, stay inside unless there's a definite schedule of what 𝐿 was doing. Maybe the answer would change as I became more desperate, but hopefully it could stay the same. My gaze flickered over to the window, the thick drapes still shielding me from the outside world. Now that I was looking at it, I wondered if I could fit through the metal. After quickly pushing the window up and looking at the bars, I gave an unimpressed huff. No, there was no fitting through these things, but they were far out of the wall. It was a good 4 feet, and I got an idea. The bars were more like mesh now that I got a closer look. With a thoughtful hum, I tested my weight on the bars. They didn't so much as shift, just stayed sturdy. After thorough inspection, I located a small high logo, Hatsum Industries. These bars were created by the CEO's kid when she was 5, something that would have immediately sent her into preparation to become the next leader. And, yep, I poked my finger into a small space in between the mesh. And my finger was met with a clear layer that was equally as strong. These bars would have costed a fortune, but now that they were here, there's no use in getting upset. That didn't stop the little bud of anger that was planted in my heart from growing ever so slightly. I pulled over a large thick black blanket, one that was easily large enough to cover the space. Snatching a few small metal clamps I had been experimenting on, I draped the blanket over the bars. The metal circles weren't clamps, exactly, but would hold stuff in place. As I clicked a button and stuck the device onto the surface of the blanket, it stuck to the wall behind the blanket, effectively holding it in place. After a few more stickers, yep, they were now stickers. Anyways, after a few more of the stickers were placed down around the windowsill and in some places inside of the space, the outside world was effectively blocked out by black blanket, no light showing. After that, all there was left to do was make a nest out of pillows and blankets. Some would no doubtedly fall out and back into my room, but perhaps a longer version of the stickers would work. A bar, this time, or a huge, still circle-shaped sticker that could fold down the middle. It could become an effective tool to block me off from the rest of the room, creating a small, comforting space when it was needed. After finishing the space, I pulled the curtains closed again to hide it, immediately taking some of the scrap metal and tools from my closet and drawer alike. My materials notebook sat open, flipped into the pages I would need. I had taken to cataloging everything I got from the beach. The first run each trip was now dubbed a run had gotten me a lot of the stuff I needed to start out. But I had now gone to the beach 3 different times now, getting new stuff every time. When my materials eventually dwindled down from different runs, I would mark them on a new page as one collective thing. But every time I used something I marked it off. It was much easier to know what I had left and from which run. About half of run 2 was slightly damaged tools I could work with. The zoom goggles had to be the best. After a while of tinkering and trying to repair them, they were practically good as new, allowing me to zoom in on tiny details. It may have taken 2 months, but I could ignore that setback. After all, it had allowed me to learn new material and intricate machinery techniques I didn't know about before. And I fixed up an alarm clock from the first run, allowing me to throw the All Might-themed one into the graveyard with the rest of it. But back to the goggles. They would be amazing to use for intricate projects and creating circuit boards, if I do have to make the boards and can't order them online. Having to do that for each circuit board I would need would be a pain, but it'll be fine. As the hours dragged on, each filled with me distractedly working on a large sticker, 𝐒𝐭 still didn't return home. After the clock struck midnight, I was starting to wonder if 𝐒𝐭 would be coming back tonight, or if she was staying somewhere else. My mind whispered to me, individual voices pushing me to leave, to go to the beach one last time to try and get a part I would need for the big sticker. After another 30 minutes had passed, I couldn't take it anymore. Growling slightly, I resisted the urge to slam my stuff down on the floor. The people telling me to go had added another member, 𝐾𝐿. Why did they want me to leave so bad? Was it because it was dangerous? A bad choice. They got amusement out of my suffering, so that was probably it. But it was 12:30. She had never been out that late before, and the chances of her coming back for the night were slim. I gave in, silently tiptoeing down the stairs into the front door. I glanced out the peephole, only seeing an empty hallway. Then I was opening the door and leaving, practically printing out of there and down the silent streets of night. I ran towards the beach, my feet slapping against concrete. Oh, right. I had forgotten to put on shoes. Going to the beach wasn't a good idea, then. I slowed, sighing before sitting down in an alleyway. The night was nice, being able to listen to it. Of course, the night brought danger as a shadowy figure jumped from the roof, looked down at me, and said, "I want to train you." 8 years ago my life ended the moment the doctor had uttered those words. The moment my precious Izuku was officially diagnosed as quirkless. I was in just as much shock then. My eyes didn't notice the All Might figurine falling from Izu's hands, nor did my ears pick up the faint clatter. All I could hear was a faint ringing, disgust rising up in my stomach as I glanced over at my baby boy. Only then did I finally take in what had been so obvious before. The way he was so very thin, smaller than the rest of the kids his age. His bright eyes, dimming with shock as he shut down, a trait that would get him killed. The way his dream was apparent, even after the doctor told him he couldn't do it. Bile rose in my throat as I stared at the child I had thought of as strong. No, this baby was nothing but fragile, a porcelain doll that would shatter at a moment's notice. There was already a crack, his dream beginning to be shattered. I wouldn't let him be hurt by the world. He doesn't know how fragile he is, but soon he would see. I stamped down the rising feelings in my gut and just stared. So later that night when we got home, after a fight with 𝐵𝘃𝐵 that had him packing his things and leaving, I was hugging precious 𝐒𝐿. It was only a soft grip, making sure he didn't shatter even more as I felt the tears running down my face, dripping onto the floor and puddling with his own. "I'm sorry, 𝐒𝐿-kun," I sobbed, holding him softly. I didn't only cry for him, though. I cried for the way despair and resentment started to rise in my gut, the way I had to stamp them out. 𝐵𝘃𝐵 was gone, had left me with a porcelain doll that I had no idea what to do with. Would he actually stay in touch like he promised? Even then, disgust at myself started to choke me. A mother, being more concerned for her husband than she is her own kid. What was wrong with me? What did I do to create this child? 1 year later, 𝐒𝐿. I cried, seeing the burn marks that littered his entire frame, skidding to my knees in front of him as he walked through the doorway. My hands patted all over him, searching for more injuries as I scanned the damage that had been done. "Oh, 𝐒𝐿-kun, how many times have I told you that you need to be careful around Katsuki and his quirk? We all know these accidents aren't his fault." Leading him into the kitchen and setting him on the countertop, I pulled out the medical kit. It was already dangerous enough to have him up there, but it was an easier way of making sure I could patch up the cracks that were threatening to shatter him. "𝗵𝗲 𝗏𝗏 he did this. He was B." I cut my son off with a few soft words. "𝐒𝐿, you don't need to pretend Katsuki is doing anything wrong. He just started manifesting his quirk. It must have been an accident. I know you're a bit jealous that he has a quirk and you don't, but it's okay." I gently wiped tears from my son's face and smiled. But 𝐒𝐿 started. "No buts, 𝐒𝐿," I scorned. "You can't be putting Katsuki down because you want attention. You're just really fragile. It's easier for you to get hurt. That's why I'm here, to protect you." "Like All Might," 𝐒𝐿 breathed, lighting up as he stared at me, his eyes sparkling. "Yeah, like your own personal All Might, 𝐒𝐿." He jumped into my arms as I finished patching up his wounds. The happy mask that had covered my face faded as the child clutched onto me. A small frown tipped down the corners of my lips as I let out a light laugh. That was dangerous. He was too fragile. What if I dropped him? Then, for the millionth time over the past year of having a quirkless son, the vise around my heart tightened again, and I had to shove down the anger I felt. Why had the universe done this? What had I done? Tears pooled in my eyes as I put on a facade for the child who would never be able to experience the real world, lest it be too rough and swallow his charms completely. 1 year later, I chose to ignore the burns 𝐒𝐿 came home with. This time, as they were near constant at this point. He was too fragile, but never seemed to listen. Katsuki was his best friend, but my baby just never seemed to be able to adapt. I shook my head miserably. It was just another product of his quirklessness, just another thing I would have to look out for. Instead, I mustered a fake smile and turned, placing the large plate of katsudon on the table for 𝐒𝐿. It was a bit bland, no strong flavors that might hurt his tongue or stomach in any way. Knowing the dish was his favorite was something that just came naturally to me. It might be because katsudon sounded like 𝗏𝗏 and Katsuki, and reminded him of his best friend. I wasn't able to muster the strength to tell 𝐒𝐿 to stop hanging out with Katsuki. After all, I had known the Bakugos for forever and would never drive that wedge between us. Losing them, too, might send me over the edge. It seemed 𝐒𝐿 was trying his best, though, constantly insisting that the other child had been harming him on purpose. He really needed to stop attempting to get my attention so much. I was right here, ready to look after him. Couldn't he see that? He was the cause of 𝐵𝘃𝐵 leaving, so the least he could do was be perceptive and realize I was here for him, his sole provider. The fact that he might look up to Katsuki more than he did me made my blood boil, but I calmed quickly. This was just another aspect of his quirk status. He wasn't perceptive, either. Another thing I would have to remember. He would come around in time, though, no need to worry. He'll love me just as much as I do him soon enough. 2 years later, I smiled warmly as I watched 𝐒𝐿 sit on the couch watching the news. He was just so excited. Then, after blinking for a moment, I realized he likes watching TV more than he likes talking to me. Well, this could strain his eyes. It was dangerous for someone as fragile as him. What if he went blind? So it was for no other reason than I decided to set a limit to how much TV he could watch a week. Only 1 hour. And that was me being generous. "Honey, I know," I soothed, holding 𝐒𝐿. "I'm only doing what's best for you. You're too fragile to watch TV for so long." "Oh, okay, Mama," 𝐒𝐿 practically wailed, tears dripping down his face. A smile took over my face as I hugged the child, my eyes softening. There we go. He'll eventually depend on me for everything. He'll realize he doesn't need the outside world more than he needs me. The 𝐒𝐿-𝗵𝗲 of the past would have been horrified at the way I had started to manipulate my baby, my precious doll. But really, it was already too late the second 𝐒𝐿 had been diagnosed as quirkless. "I'll take care of you, 𝐒𝐿. You can come to me with anything, I murmured, my grip tightening ever so slightly. This child was mine. 1 year later, when I awoke and walked downstairs to make breakfast for my Izuku, it was a shock to see him in the kitchen. It was even more of a scare to notice the large knife he held in his hand, the way one of his fingers was already bleeding. My feet moved quickly as I said, "Izu, you're too fragile to be doing that. Put the knife down." "Oh my baby, what happened?" My arms were wrapped around my child, but I had noticed the way his face fell when I rushed into the room, when he put down the knife. Does he prioritize his happiness over his safety and my rules? I told him he couldn't go into the kitchen or mess with anything sharp. It was hard to ignore the darker parts of my brain that whispered that he didn't want me as a mother anymore, that he wanted to be free more than he wanted to be with me. But I was only protecting him. A dark feeling was rising up my throat, threatening to choke me. Anger, resentment, despair. First Izuku had ended up quirkless, then he blatantly disobeyed me. I've been there for him time and time again, have bandaged his wounds, have looked out for him. He is my child, mine and no one else's. So why does he put his needs above mine? He is the center of my life as I should be the center of his. There was no reason for him to be so selfish. Kami, what sort of brat am I raising? 1 year later I paused the movie I was watching when an excited Izuku ran down the stairs and into my arms. Slower down the stairs. Honey, you might fall. Izu nodded quickly, and I grinned as I watched the scene. So he was learning. Maybe I could allow him to get more screen time. Mommy, I learned something, the baby exclaimed, bouncing excitedly in his mother's arms. Leaning backwards, I took in his expression and asked, "What is it, Izu?" Then, in perfect English with an impeccable accent, he said, "I learned English. Do you think we can see Daddy again?" My heart stopped in my chest as I stared down at Izuku. He loves his father more than he loves me. Am I not good enough for him? Is he not okay with having one parent instead of two? I do my best, and what does it get me? An ungrateful brat. As if not seeing the anger growing on my face, he continued, "I thought we would be able to see him again. It would be so fun." "Izuku," my voice was deafeningly quiet. "Why yes," he whispered back, fear evident on his face. Ignoring that twist of satisfaction and disgust that came with seeing his emotions, I stood. "Am I not enough for you? You know nothing of the world or the way it could harm you, and yet the one person keeping you safe you hate. What did I do wrong?" Tears were pouring down my cheeks, and Izu murmured, "But I only wanted to see the person that abandoned us, that left you here with me. You're so lucky I love you, Izu, because no one else ever will. I'm the only person that sees you. And don't poke your head into something you don't understand." I shouted, anger and sadness combining into one in my chest. Izuku stuttered, before mumbling, "I am sorry, Mama, I didn't mean to make you upset. I can forget it. We can watch something. Oh, or, if my time for the week is up already, we could enjoy some katsuden." Looking down at Izuku, I couldn't see him. My mind was too busy rushing with thoughts. "No, Izuku, go to your room, we'll talk about this later." 1 year later, I was stupid for believing my precious child could ever be perfect, would ever be able to stop the temptations of the world around them and not give in to anything bad. Of course, that mindset changed the minute Izuku walked in smelling of smoke, with injuries, but a dopey grin on his face. Was he stoned? Oh, that crossed the line. My fists clenched as I yelled at the baby, the porcelain doll that was so close to shattering, trying to get him to understand. How could he be so selfish, so self-absorbed? Did he even know how bad it would look if he got killed in a drug deal? I did everything for him. Never asked for anything in return but his undying loyalty. How could he put me through this, year after year? Izuku was never actually smart, like I once believed, was he? Those stupid analysis notebooks I let him keep would be the next to go. The oldest copy would be thrown away first, and then he could throw the rest away later. Anger and resentment finally bloomed fully in my heart. No foot to crush them down this time as I saw Izuku, really saw him. This fragile little boy was just doing his best to manipulate me. Well, I wasn't having it. He was my child, and I would keep him for now, as there was still something that tugged me towards him, wanted me to hold him in a hug. But I also missed my husband, missed the way he would comfort me when I was upset, the way he would run a hand through my hair and whisper soothing nothings. When I was pregnant, and he would get me anything and everything my heart desired. And even now, as he continued to send money I didn't deserve, because he saw something before I did. He realized Izuku could never be anything, understood the world would eventually corrupt him. But he wouldn't rub it in my face. Even now, something drew me to both Hisashi and Izuku, something kept me rooted here with my child. This was my mistake, my doing. I would hold him back for as long as I could. My hands clenched into tight fists as Izuku walked upstairs to take a shower. For the first time since the diagnosis, I didn't try to push back the putrid emotions that fought to claim my heart. Current time, I couldn't take this anymore. Every time I walked past Izuku's door, heard him muttering late at night, it slowly drove me insane. I had 5 more years left to keep him from everything. And it would have to be in seclusion. He didn't have the right to an education, especially if he couldn't even pass his classes in the first place. He needed to stay in his room, away from the world. After I had caught him with his nose all bloody and beaten, surprisingly not smelling of smoke, I knew that something had happened, maybe drugs or the sort. He had no way to get money, so maybe that was it. He couldn't pay. So he would stay up there, night and day, without any food or water, and understand how he needed me more than anything else, needed me to give him food and money and supplies. He wouldn't get far in life, and the second he turned 18 I would be gone. I would finally be able to see Hisashi again, be held in his arms. He had to wait 13 years, and he understood that, but he would always wait. But last time Izu and I argued, my hands clenched into fists, I wanted more than anything to shatter that doll. Then piece him back together again, a better version. But what if I couldn't fix him? What if the police showed up? So I needed to leave for a week, a few days, a month, something. I needed freedom, peace. So that week I would stay in a hotel, meet with Mitsuki and some other friends I hadn't seen in a good while. I would get my social interaction and then isolation out of the way before me and Izuku could come face to face again. That way I could be calm. I would be able to stomach the sight of the boy I so desperately despised and loved at the same time. Don't worry, Izuku. I'll be back. I'll be back and you can rely on me again. That was the last time I thought about the boy before shoving him to the back of my mind. Plans were already forming in my head. Meet up with Mitsuki and the other girls, go to the spa, get our nails done, find some fancy restaurants to go to. This week will be amazing. As my phone rang, I saw it was Mitsuki. A smile made its way onto my face as I put the device up to my ear, with my mind firmly set on the task before me. Having one of the best weeks I've had in years, I missed the way there was a light thump in the alleyway beside me, the green-haired boy that was backed into a corner by a dark figure. I only passed by obliviously, missing the sight of a boy that I had once been considered my son being in danger. This mother had started rotting away years ago. The minute hatred and anger had become something I felt around the person who I was supposed to love unconditionally.